Cohen was killed at the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem. 3 others, a woman in her 40s, a 30-year-old man, and a 15-year-old boy, suffered serious to moderate wounds when 2 Palestinian terrorists rammed their vehicle into civilians and then attempted to stab them. Cohen was laid to rest last night in Kiryat Arba. A widower, he leaves behind 6 children and many grandchildren. According to the IDF and eyewitnesses, the terrorists, identified as 18-year-old Ibrahim Imran El Atrash of Hebron and 18-year-old Walid Mohammed Khalil Sabane of Beit Ummah, arrived by car, accelerated into people standing near the junction, and then exited the vehicle with knives. Nearby IDF reservists reacted instantly, shooting and killing both attackers. Inside the terrorist car, security forces later discovered explosive materials, which were neutralized by Border Police bomb disposal units. Palestinian Islamic Jihad praised the attack, calling on Palestinians to escalate violence. Hamas called it a, quote, natural response, though neither group formally claimed responsibility. Prime Minister Netanyahu condemned the terror attack, saying in a statement that, "Today we experienced another Palestinian terrorist attack, and we are determined to complete the war on all fronts, including disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a greater danger." In other fronts, Lebanese officials say 13 people were killed and 4 injured after an Israeli drone strike hit a Hamas training compound inside the Ain al-Hilwe refugee camp near Sidon. Now, this is the deadliest Israel Air Force strike in Lebanon since the ceasefire nearly a year ago. Lebanese media reported a vehicle at the entrance to the camp was hit by 3 missiles, with damages both inside and outside the vehicle. The IDF said it used precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and real-time intelligence to minimize civilian harm. The IDF confirming the strike, saying the terrorists targeted were actively preparing attacks against Israel and IDF forces. Now, the military says the compound was used by Hamas for training, planning, and operational briefings ahead of attempted attacks on Israeli troops. And the strike does mark one of the most significant Israeli attacks at Hamas inside Lebanon in recent months. Early this year, Hamas commanders were targeted and killed in Tripoli and Sidon. IDF sources say the facility had been under surveillance for an extended period, with intelligence teams waiting for the moment when dozens of operatives were present. Meanwhile, in another IDF airstrike in South Lebanon, 2 operatives of Hezbollah were eliminated. According to the IDF, one of the terrorists was engaged in trying to renew Hezbollah activities in the Binchbel area. The second was targeted while trying to collect intelligence on Israeli forces near Blida. Both were operating in violation of the ceasefire agreement signed last year between Israel and the Lebanese government. Tanzanians and Israelis attended a ceremony for the repatriation of the remains of Tanzanian hostage Joshua Lotu Molel, held at Ben Gurion Airport here in Israel. Now, Molel was an agricultural student from Tanzania who came to Kibbutz Nachal Oz 19 days before the October 7th attack in 2023, where he was killed and his body taken to Gaza by the terrorists. His remains were handed over by Hamas a week ago and taken to the Israeli Forensic Institute in Tel Aviv, who made the identification. Now, these handovers, of course, are part of the U.S.-mediated deal with Hamas, which is still to release 3 more bodies of hostages it has been holding in Gaza, those of the Israelis Ron Givli and Dra'or, and a Thai agricultural worker, Suthisak Rinthalek. And back in the U.S., a Brooklyn neo-Nazi convicted of planning to poison Jewish children has been found guilty in a federal courthouse. The jury has convicted Michael Chikashvili of leading a hate-driven plot to poison Jewish children and promote mass attacks, with prosecutors warning his activities posed a grave threat to the community. The 21-year-old Georgian national was convicted of severe hate crimes and plotting a mass casualty attack that targeted youngsters in New York's Hasidic Orthodox community. Now, he was identified as the leader of an international terror group known as the Insane Murder Cult. He admitted to attempting to poison Jewish children and distributing detailed instructions for manufacturing explosives and lethal toxins. According to the indictment, he planned a large-scale attack intending to take place in New York on New Year's Eve in 2024. An accomplice was to dress in a festive costume and hand out poison candy to Jewish children. The defendant had been working at a rehabilitation facility in Brooklyn and was actually employed by a Hasidic family to care for an elderly relative. In conversations with associates, he boasted, "I worked for the Jewish family, and they pay me to torture a dying Jew. I think I almost killed him today." Now, Chickasaw circulated a manifesto titled The Haters Manual, which encouraged mass killings and school shootings. He was extradited from Moldova to the United States in May 2025. He faces a sentence of up to 40 years in prison. Now let's get back to today's big story. All the headlines that came out of the White House meeting between President Trump and the Saudi Crown Prince. For more on that, we are joined from the U.S. by Dr. Eric Mandel. He's the founder and director of MEPIN. That's the Middle East Political Information Network. And Robert Silverman, a former U.S. diplomat and editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune. Robert, as a former diplomat, I just want to start with you. We can start breaking out some of the sort of details involved here. But just as an extraordinary meeting, seems to be a real new chapter in relations between the U.S. and the Saudis, especially, of course, after the sort of rupture that happened following the murder of Adnan Khashoggi.
Right. U.S. and Saudi Arabia have had a very close alliance for many years. I served in Saudi Arabia in the years 2005 to 2007. It was super close back then during the George W. Bush administration. You're right. There was a brief period, I should say, during the early Biden administration where the relations were tough. But even Biden got over that and, sought Saudi's support. There are longstanding common shared values and shared ties between the two countries.
All right. Well, certainly that seems to be the case with this administration. Eric, let's start looking at the specifics of this trip. Eric, there was some anticipation going into this meeting that we might see some kind of normalization of ties between, or an announcement of some, perhaps Saudi Arabia considering the Abraham Accords. But Eric, it doesn't seem, none of that seems to have panned out. The Saudis sticking firm on their insistence about Palestinian normalization.
You're correct. They came with a wish list and they got just about everything. They wanted a defense pact similar to what the Qataris got, or as much as a president could give without congressional approval. So they became a major non-NATO ally. They wanted something with a nuclear program that's now a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement. They wanted advanced weapons. They've been offered F-35s. They wanted more in AI. They got an AI memorandum of understanding. They wanted more investments. There are more investments. And this was all for a transactional promise of now up to $1 trillion. We have to remember that the promise was made in May of $600 billion, and none of that has really materialized in the United States. So regarding the Abraham Accords and the Palestinian state, what I would say is state-owned Palestinian media, Al Arabiya, how they refer to that Palestinian state is, and they wrote, quote, in convoluted language, the resolution does not mention possible future Palestinian state. And they're referring to both the 20-point plan and the UN Security Council resolution. So they're showing their distance. So they've been given everything up front. And in my opinion, that the F-35s, which have been given, are a significant policy and strategic shift. And they do undermine the very definition that's in American law of the qualitative military edge that Israel is supposed to have. And it's not just my opinion. The New York Times reported U.S. officials, both in defense and security, said that this undermines Israel's air superiority. And also the Air Force Israeli office wrote to the political echelon, also telling them they're worried about this. So I think one of the things that may come out is maybe there's a model here that the delivery of those F-35s will be what they did with the Emiratis, say that you're going to have them, but we won't deliver them until you meet certain criteria. That could be normalization. But from an American national security point of view, it's the Chinese that we're worried about. They're getting their hands on that technology, the stealth technology, because you remember just, I think it was last month or 2 months ago, the Saudis and the Chinese had a joint military exercise. So there's a lot for America to worry about of what's there. And just remember, we're making deals with authoritarian regimes. We're not dealing, with democracies. And you remember that MBS has to transition to become king. There could be instability there. You could lose that position.
All right, I want to give Robert a chance to respond to it. Eric's saying there's a lot for the U.S. to worry about Chinese influence, and this move is counting that. But it sounds like there's a lot for Israel to worry about here, at least in Eric's interpretation of the thing. How much of that, both in terms of the fact that Israel, at least publicly, I mean, maybe there's some behind-the-scenes agreement we don't know about, publicly did not get any of the things that perhaps wanted to see out of this meeting move towards normalization of ties with Saudi Arabia. And certainly the sale of those F-35s is something, as Eric has said, even if the government is publicly sort of downplaying its reaction, the Israeli government, the military here is making it clear this is a worrisome development.
Well, let me just say the devil's always in the details here. And there are two issues, and they're very different issues with the Saudi purchase of the F-35s. It's the QME, the qualitative military edge. That's in U.S. law. It's not just a nice to do. It's a requirement of U.S. law. And separate from that, there is the concern, which Eric mentioned, of either Saudi Arabia or the UAE inadvertently or avertently passing U.S. technology to China. Now, when it comes to the UAE's purchase of F-35, Israelis approved that. That wasn't a qualitative military edge for Israel problem. It was a Chinese ability to acquire U.S. stealth technology problem. The reason being that the UAE has a very close relationship with China. The cell phone network in the UAE is Huawei. They've penetrated all kinds of things there. Now, so the details matter. If Saudi Arabia has adjudicated to have safeguards on the technology of the F-35, then the Chinese issue will be less for the Saudi sale than it was for the UAE sale. As for QME, that's a discussion between the U.S. and Israel, and it's sort of in the eye of the beholder to some extent. It depends on which version of the F-35 gets sold to Saudi Arabia. Remember, all these airplanes that are like car models, they have different gadgets and they have different versions, and you can give them a version that doesn't have everything that Israel does have. So there are ways of dealing with this. Look, the Saudi did not get everything that they wanted out of this meeting, and there wasn't. This is an ongoing relationship. It's not a one meeting thing. The relationships develop over time, and what Saudi Arabia has specifically wanted from the U.S. is not what the U.S. gave Qatar, which was an executive order, which a subsequent president can revoke, or even an existing president can change his mind, and executive orders are easy to pull back. They want something that is approved by the Senate, a treaty like a NATO Article 5 like security guarantee. Now, that's a much harder thing to do. And so, no, they're not getting everything they want. They do have a domestic problem in Saudi Arabia with moving ahead with Israel without something for the Palestinians. If you've ever been to Saudi Arabia, you will know that generations there have been inculcated in this Palestinian-Israeli problem, and that it's deeply ingrained in that society. Billboards, as you drive by the highways, talk about it, and so you have to address the Saudi public concern. I think the Saudi government has to begin to socialize its country, that it's going to eventually have relations with Israel. When we see that messaging going on within Saudi Arabia, you know that the normalization will proceed. But it's not just a matter of rulers signing agreements, it's also a matter of socializing publics, and that takes time.
That
And I
takes
would say
time, but
finally, yeah,
yeah, go ahead,
I
Robert.
would
Finish your point.
I would just say finally, my personal view is, look, we've seen peace treaties work well, as more or less it is with the UAE. We've seen it not do much, frankly, like the U.S. Lebanon agreement from the 1980s that didn't really lead to much, or with Mauritania that was revoked by Mauritania a couple of years later. And so I'm not so focused on the actual signing ceremony of of a normalization agreement. I'm more concerned about how the two publics started interacting. And I would prefer to see Israeli businesses and Saudi businesses working together. When I start to see that, then I'll be very optimistic about the future of that normalization.
All right. Well, Eric, Robert, and we'll come back to him talking about this is a longer term process, the whole normalization. I think we agree on that. But there is something that has to be addressed immediately, and that is the post-war situation in Gaza. Again, the President Trump clearly wants the Saudis to be involved in that. They're making it clear, and they're clearly one of the pressuring forces on the Israeli government to accept some kind of political horizon to the Palestinians, or the issue of the disarmament. Who's going to be in that ISF force? Who's going to disarm Hamas? And reports now, and I'm not. This has been confirmed that Steve Witkoff may be meeting with leaders of Hamas, which itself is a worrying development. So, how much concern, again, to go back to Israel, out of the result of that, not focused on the longer term normalization, but just on what is happening now on the ground in Gaza?
Yeah, I'll just start off. Look, it's a huge accomplishment. The U.S. got a UN Security Council resolution this week that incorporates the terms of the 20-point Trump plan. It's a huge accomplishment. The Biden administration never could have done this, wouldn't have even tried to have done anything similar to this. We just have to recognize that it's an amazing achievement, and it's based upon a really smart negotiation strategy. And you have to wonder how these guys who come out of the New York City real estate world turn out to be so far superior to the traditional peacemakers and peace processors in this. But they have the track record speaks for itself. And look, no one gets exactly what they want out of this. It's a compromise. And in Israel, there's deep concerns. But you know what? Israel didn't come up with a plan. Israel prosecuted a war for 2 years, and I was there on the ground and sometimes working with some of the people there. They did not produce a post-war plan, even one that they could have passed to the U.S. and had the U.S. adopt. They refused for all kinds of reasons, political culture reasons, domestic politics reasons. Israel is relying on the U.S. here. And so you're going to get a plan that isn't going to have everything Israel wants in it. But let's be clear, it meets the Trump plan and the UN Security Council resolution meets a lot of, if not all, of the war aims of Israel in this war with Hamas. There is, yeah.
On paper, I would say, but for example,
go back to
disarmament. I'm talking about the disarmament of Hamas primarily, and the process by what.
Hold on. The peace treaty, the peace plan does not use the word disarm. It talks about demilitarization. That's very different. You have to, and the gap between the disarming and demilitarization is where I think you're going to find some interesting discussions on implementation here, because demilitarization probably means, giving up heavy weapons, rockets, other things. I'm not sure that it means that Hamas is required by the 20-point plan to give up all their sidearms and stuff. I don't know.
Well, that
That's
could
a
be
discussion.
problematic for us. But I want to I wanted to give Eric
Disarming
a
is
chance.
not in the peace plan or in the security.
I
That's
understand.
our interpretation.
I understood. I want to give Eric a chance to respond because I think he
I
has
think
some
it's clear
points.
it's supposed to be disarmament and demilitarization. The disarmament is getting rid of weapons. They played games between offensive and defensive weapons. Demilitarization, to my mind, a big part of that is getting rid of the tunnel networks. And those tunnel networks are going to take it's going to take years to get rid of all of them. The majority of the tunnel networks are still in place, believe it or not, even on Israel's side of the yellow line, because there are 100 hostages, 100, well, the Turks call them civilians, 100 terrorists in the tunnel network. So on the good part, that I'll agree on the diplomatic part, the 20-point plan was endorsed within the UN Security Council resolution. There was no demand for Israel to go back to the 67 lines or a full withdrawal. It was endorsed by everybody with two abstentions of the two people who could have vetoed it, China and Russia. On a practical level, this is not going to happen. I have to say, who is going to disarm Hamas? There is no one other than the Israelis. Outside of the box thinking would be some private contractors that are there. I'm not sure anybody will buy it, but you could get mercenaries, if you will, to go in and deal with them. But there is no Arab country that's going to do it. Whatever Palestinian Authority or Palestinian police force is not going to do that. And so that is a huge problem. And getting back to the Saudis being involved in doing this, because America hopefully wants the Saudis to be the ones to be the financiers in Gaza and Syria and Lebanon. They didn't get any commitment. America didn't get any commitment from the Saudis to really be involved, not with soldiers and not definitely with tangible amounts. The president is transactional. We didn't hear numbers of what the Saudis were doing. So that's why I said I thought it was a one-sided deal. So Gaza is way up in the air at this point. And you still have those 100 terrorists in the tunnels. You still have Hamas that was the dominant force and now is ingrained as the dominant force. You have two types of aid that are coming in, food and commercial. Hamas is building its coffers again by taxing up to 40% what is going in there. So they are strengthened, and I don't see anybody doing anything. So I think the question is, from an outside person right now at 6,000 miles away, is that it's just a matter of time when Israel is going to have to go back there or not, or it will get into this, that people refer to an East-West Germany, East-West Berlin type of scenario. And how sustainable is that? And how long will America have patience for that? Certainly not the international community.
Well, okay, again, I want to give Robert a chance to respond. And Robert, just also, there is this feeling in Israel, given everything we've just said, that sort of like the government here has been put into the passenger seat too much so, and that the U.S. and President Trump is just driving this train sometimes in directions that may not be beneficial for Israel.
Well, Israel put itself in the passenger seat, Caleb. Gaza is what, 70 kilometers, 65 kilometers away from Tel Aviv. You would think that Israel would have had a lot of good ideas about how to do post-war. It had zero. So it had a lot of ideas on how to establish perimeters, tactical military things, and of course, prosecuting a war. But for all kinds of reasons that we can discuss another time, Israel did not produce a post-war plan. The U.S. did. And it meets most of Israel's war aims. Is it 100% that what Israel would have wanted? No, because it's an American plan. It's not an Israeli plan.
Understand.
But it is what it is. But look, let me just say.
Just 30 more seconds, Robert.
The post-war reconstruction can start in the 53% of Gaza that Israel currently occupies.
Right.
Israel occupies all of the border crossings into Gaza. So whether or not Hamas is demilitarized in the short term or not, the post-war reconstruction can start. The U.S. is talking to all kinds of countries, Muslim majority countries and European countries, about providing troops and support. So
we'll
stay
have
tuned.
to leave it at that, and we'll have to stay tuned, as President Trump likes to say. Robert Silverman, Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you for joining us on ILTV. Now, one thing that Israel has learned tragically over the past few years is that when it comes to security, worst-case scenarios are something that authorities have to be ready to contend with. Our correspondent India Naftali has gotten the chance to see firsthand how the Israel police are preparing for that eventuality. Her full report will premiere on today's Daily Show at 8 p.m. Israel time. But India joins us now. Tell us a little about what you saw there, what your report will deal with.
Well, Caleb, I'm really looking forward to our viewers getting to see a glimpse of how this country is preparing for, God forbid, another mass casualty scenario. Yesterday, I was with them, and it was incredible what I saw. These officers are taking the lessons they learned from October 7th and putting them into practice, and that's what you're going to see tonight. I was able to join the Yassam unit, which is a specialized police unit that they specialize in tactical SWAT, counter terror, and also some other special operations. Basically, the idea is for them to train for the unexpected. We're not talking about, Kalev, we're not talking about the standard terror attack. We're talking about scenarios much like October 7th that these officers wouldn't imagine, but they're being taught to think on their feet, and on how to scan perimeters, how to think quick when the impossible happens, when the unimaginable happens. Interestingly enough, I was told that the Southern District of the police ran a drill very similar to this just before October 7th. And that same drill was quite similar to what happened on October 7th.
All right. Well, we see some of the footage as you were talking from your report. It looks quite dramatic. And of course, we'll look forward to seeing that later today on our daily show. India Naftali, thank you for that. And that ends this broadcast. Stay with us, though, throughout the day for the next edition of ILTV on the Hour as events continue to unfold, or you can scan the QR code up there on your screen for our apps. Until then, I'm Caleb Ben David.
Over these last days, this is what Judea and Samaria looked like. The Palestinian village of Jabba and Gush Etzion, homes and cars set on fire. Jewish youth running through the streets as IDF and border police try to restore order. Yesterday, the army demolished an illegal extension of the Mitzad settlement at Sur Misgavi. Hilltop youth clashed with our own soldiers, hurling rocks and injuring officers. And then, within hours, a group of extremists allegedly marched into Jabba in what the IDF itself condemned as a violent riot. This isn't an isolated incident. The IDF recorded hundreds of quote-unquote nationalistic attacks by Israeli civilians last year and says this year's numbers have already surpassed 2024. UN reports describe record-high settler-related violence and warn it is destabilizing Judea and Samaria. So tonight on Insider, we're asking, what is really happening in the West Bank? Who are these so-called hilltop youth? Is Israel failing to enforce the law on Jewish extremists, even as it fights Palestinian terror? And what are the consequences for Palestinians, for Israelis, and for our democracy, and of course, the international standing? To break it all down, I'm joined by Malka Fleischer, co-founder of the Female Security Initiative by Yadayim Shelanu, Naomi Khan, director of the International Division at Regavim, former Meretz MK Mosi Raz, and Anton Goodman from Rabbis for Human Rights. Let's get started. So, Naomi, I'm going to start with you. I want to talk about the numbers. The Defense Ministry says that there were 675 incidents of nationalistic crime by Israeli civilians living in Judea and Samaria in 2024, and that already there have been over 700 this year alone. If you look at the UN numbers, we're talking about more than 1,400 incidents that they are tracking in 2024, and continuing to this year being the highest level since the time they started tracking. Why is there, first of all, such a big gap between these two data sets? And second of all, what is the real picture that is happening on the ground?
So first, so that there's no misunderstanding, there is such a thing as violence in the Jewish sector in Judea and Samaria. It is abominable, it is abhorrent, it is illegal, it should be treated in the full extent of the law. That being said, there's a disparity of almost 300% between what Israeli official sources count as events and what the United Nations publishes. And it should be clear also that the United Nations figures have gone far beyond just a data set, and an incriminating data set at that. They have had real results, practical results on the ground for at least the past 2 years and before that as well. So we began to ask what the disparity is, and we tried to get our hands on the UN data. We had to actually do some very interesting moves to get that data. But what we found is that of the 8,332 incident reports that are listed on the United Nations data set, the vast majority, first of all, 2,700 or so were actually mislabeled. They were acts of Arab violence against Jews. And of the remaining over 6,300 events, 95 to 98% of them either didn't involve settlers, didn't involve violence, or didn't occur in Judea and Samaria.
So what is the number that we're looking at?
The number that we're actually looking at over a 6-year period was 833 incidents. About 50% of those were apparently incidents that were not instigated by the Jews, but were in response. And that still leaves a number that is far too high, and that the Israeli government must actually deal with every possible severity.
So, Moshe, I want you to respond to that. When you hear these figures coming from Naomi, over 800 incidents, and of course the UN numbers, again, well over 1,400, 264 they're claiming in October alone. That's an average of 8 a day. Do you feel that Israeli society then is underplaying the scope? As actually Naomi insinuated that the Israeli government is not taking enough action, or is it really like very exaggerated to focus on settler violence when we hear the numbers of Palestinian attacks?
But everybody deal with Palestinian attacks. In response, we killed 70,000 people. Yes, nobody deal with that. And I prefer to say Jewish terror because it's not only settlers. They get people coming every weekend from Israel too. Maybe it's mainly settlers, but it's not that important. And it's not just people who want to attack other people. It's all with purpose to take their lands. This is the reason why so many Palestinian communities forced to live in the last 2 years, but not only in the last 2 years. And all that is with full knowledge that the police and army will do nothing about that. I'll take Naomi's figures. How many of them were even investigated by the police, called somebody to ask, not even going to the court?
We actually
How
have
many
numbers
went to prison? Very, very close to zero.
So let's give us the numbers.
Just one more sentence. The soldiers, nobody tell them that they have not only the right, they have the responsibility, and they can arrest people. How do I know? Like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in the cabinet, chief of staff said that he doesn't have he cannot arrest Israeli settlers, and it is not right. If the commander of the soldiers don't know what is the purpose of the army, how can I expect the soldier on the ground?
So, Naomi, I don't want to take too much time, but give me a percentage. What percentage are actually responsible, mostly?
Every single one of the incidents that are reported by the Israel police or the Shabak are investigated. The rate of indictment for violence, nationalist violence or any violence in the Jewish sector, is orders of magnitude higher than it is for indictment of Arab terrorism or of violence anywhere else in any other sector in Israel. So there's actually an overrepresentation and an overzealousness. Many of these indictments are eventually dismissed because they're found to be acts of self-defense.
Now, I do want to just highlight that there were more than 6,800 Palestinian attacks of various kinds that same year. And when we compare the numbers of Palestinian attacks, again, as you said, maybe they're being prosecuted more. Naomi's figures show otherwise. Anton, I want to turn to you. When we hear this kind of number, 6,800 Palestinian attacks, when people immediately bring up the Palestinian attacks and they compare the Palestinians to the Jewish attacks, do you think that's a fair comparison? Should we even be doing that? Are the Palestinian attacks rising and the Jewish violence rising commensurate, or are these two separate issues on the agenda?
I don't see why we should ignore either of these numbers.
I don't mean ignore them, but can we compare them?
Why should we compare? Why is it some kind of zero-sum game that they need to lose more people, we need to commit more crimes? It doesn't work like that. Every instance where an individual is harmed is a tragedy. And today, a young man of 30 years old was murdered in a violent terrorist act in Gush Etzion. Of course, we condemn this. We cannot live like this. But this does not stop me condemning Palestinians who are the victims of Jewish terror across the West Bank. And so the numbers game, and I have to say, Naomi, you change your tune quite often. A few months ago, you were saying that any talk of settler violence is a blood libel, as if anyone who's talking about it is anti-Semitic.
I have not changed my tune whatsoever.
And so, but now you're aware that there is the violence
and the criminal
activity.
No, we've never denied.
Exists. And let me tell you from the ground, when
violence.
you're talking about the data, you don't have the data sets. The Palestinians I met this morning who were attacked are not putting a complaint into the police. They're too scared to go there. And the police did not arrive on the scene. I've been on the ground and attacked by settlers, called the police 6-7 times, and they don't come to the ground. They refuse to come. This is an informal policy of the shy police as headed by Ben Gvir at this time. And so data sets quite simply don't work. What does work is human compassion, human rights, international law, and other safeguarding processes to make sure that the conflict does not devolve into complete anarchy and people are not being killed on the ground.
And I think that really respond, but I actually think Malka might need to respond as well.
I and Regavim, we conducted this research, and we've never changed our tune. And the very first page of everything that we do says, yes, there is settler violence. In fact, there is violence in every human society on planet Earth. And that is not a question, and it is not something that we applaud. Quite the opposite. We condemn and call, and the question is whether or not this is a phenomenon that is indicative of some sort of loss of control or government policy.
And you're saying it's not.
It clearly is not.
It's clearly, how is it clearly not? Look on the last week on the ground. Look at the number of attacks. In Beit Lid, a dairy set on fire. In Deir Istia, a mosque set on fire. In Jabba last night,
an
unprovoked attack of 100 settlers. Oh, the situation's fine. It's not out of control.
Did anyone say that that was fine?
No, but
I want to ask Malka a question.
Did anybody went to jail?
Yeah, was there one person arrested?
Yes.
No one was arrested for these attacks.
Well, it happened just last night, so we need to see what's going to happen with that. But I do want to bring up exactly what you're saying. Malka, I want you to actually respond. You live there on the ground, and you're also a mother of a number of children, and I have to ask you exactly what Anton is referring to. What are these hilltop youth or these young settlers that are going out and carrying out these attacks? Because generally speaking, this is a younger generation. What are they hearing at home, in their yeshivot, in their WhatsApp groups that are encouraging them or even allowing them to go out and attack not only Palestinians, but also our own soldiers when their hilltop is getting dismantled? What is the education that's happening here?
So that's a very good question, and I have two answers to that. The first answer to that is they see that while Hamas is literally rearming itself in the same UN buildings that collected this data about settler violence. They are literally regrouping and regaining strength both in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. And as we're recording this, they are treating people in a horrible terror attack, which happened in Gush Etzion, and they see that too. So they understand very well, possibly better than anyone in the country, how important security is and how fundamental and how fragile security still is for our people. The second thing that they hear is, once upon a time, the communities that you came from were Zionist communities. They learned that you can, that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, that we are here to develop a Jewish state, the normal basic things that Israel was founded upon. Now, you showed a video and you said at the beginning of your show, here's what Judea and Samaria looks like. This is what's happening in Judea and Samaria. That is not what's happening in Judea and Samaria. What's happening in Judea and Samaria is that kids are getting up, they're arguing with their mom about getting ready for school on time, they're getting to school, they're coming back from school, they're doing their homework, people are going to their jobs, people are getting married, people are buying apartments, people are gardening. That is what's happening in Judea and Samaria.
So, Anton, do you agree? Is this
First, I want to say I am Zionist, and the first Zionist Congress decided what is the aim of Zionism. Decided, fulfilling the right of the Jewish people to self-determination according to Mishpat HaKlal, according to the international law. What you're doing, in the way you left Israel and you live in occupied territories, and
the reason you don't live in Uganda today is because the Jewish people know that their right is to the land of Israel. Otherwise, you'd be in Uganda right now.
You have to learn what is Zionism. This is not Zionism. But
Zionism comes from the Jewish people's belief and knowledge that they connect to the land of Israel. I promise you don't believe more. I don't live in Israel. This is exactly, by the way.
Efrat is not in Israel.
Okay.
I believe more than you.
Right.
And you don't live in Israel. This is why you want tribunut. You want to annex that. So don't tell me who I am. Exactly. Now, all those details. When I was stoned by settlers, I tell the policemen there, you see, I'm stoned by settlers, and they did nothing. We know that. So this is why people don't go to the police. The police even don't have the numbers. Do you think Palestinians can go, the policemen tell them, go to Ariel, to the police in Ariel, and complain? They cannot go to Ariel.
Moshe, I want to tell you how grateful I am that you said this.
Can I just explain something? The data that I'm talking about has nothing to do with Ariel or the Israel police. We're looking at the data that is submitted to the United Nations by the Palestinian Authority itself. Are they afraid to go and report these things to the Palestinian Authority?
These are the right. This is
correct.
Probably the right data.
And we looked at those numbers, and those numbers actually are insanely misrepresenting the situation.
The actual numbers are much higher than what was reported. So and I can tell you that because I'm seeing it on the ground. And let me agree with Malka. A large percentage, the majority of the settlers are normative people who get up in the morning and whose children go to school. But also, when you drive into Efrat, the town that you live in, there's a major sign at the entrance of Efrat that says, don't hire Arab workers, only hire Jewish labor. Racism in the middle of the town, which goes by without anyone saying anything about it at all.
Every single Palestinian Authority area.
I was in Jabba this morning with a Palestinian family who they tried to set their house on fire with children in the house. Where are your normative settlers to stop this?
I just want to
Who's
say
setting houses on fire with children in them, and I don't see any settlers coming the next day and saying this is unacceptable. It has to stop.
So I just want to say how glad I am that this came out, because basically what we're talking about here is that we have two people who have spent their lives defending Jewish rights in the land of Israel, and we have two like Palestine bros, basically people
defend
who want to
way more than you. Way more than you.
You go to the international community. You go to Europe and you tell them to attack Israel. We know exactly who you are.
The minute we started with settlements, the minute we lost security, what are you talking about? Thousands of Israelis were killed because of the settlements.
And Israel is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in
Okay, finish your sentence and we're going to move on. Okay, both of you.
All you know is to incite.
Declared sovereignty.
All you know is to incite. And then you say that you're not violent. You are violent.
You are
violent.
You just told me that I don't live in Israel.
I've been in the army way more than you. And you made only damage. What you're doing there with the occupied territories. And don't tell me what to do.
Look at your face. Everything we need to know is written on your face.
We lost our security.
Okay, I want you both to stop. We're going to move on from this conversation to, well, not from the conversation, but from this point. I want to move to Naomi for a minute to talk a little bit about illegal building, okay? Because yesterday, one of what caused the incident in Jabba specifically, supposedly, was a reaction to us taking down the unauthorized expansion in Meitzad, which in fact, even Minister Bezalel Smotrich said should have been done because it went against his plans. So I want you to explain to me what is happening regarding illegal building, both on the Jewish side and the Palestinian side. I know Regavim tracks those numbers. What kind of illegal establishments are happening on both sides of the equation, and how is that impacting the rise in violence?
So I'm happy to provide the data. That is precisely what we do. That is our area of expertise. Before I do that, I want to just say unequivocally, there is no way, there is no reason, there is no excuse, there is no possible rationalization for, as a response to the demolition of illegal structures, for people to riot and damage other people's homes, or take the law in their own hands, or attack Israeli forces or Arab civilians.
Okay, but we are going to run out of time, so stick with the numbers.
103,000 illegal Arab structures are standing today. More than 103,000 are in Area C, the area under Israeli jurisdiction. Those are illegal Arab structures. There's also illegal Arab construction in the Jewish sector. That amounts to 4,211 structures. The 25 structures that were taken down yesterday were illegal structures and should have been taken down. And we believe that illegal activity damages everyone, takes the entire region to the brink of confrontation or worse, and we condemn all illegal activity. But 103,000 strategically placed Arab structures in Area C versus 4,211 structures in the Jewish sector, 85% of which are inside the municipal lines of legal recognized communities. So altogether, we're talking about approximately legal.
Illegal.
There is no law anywhere
no legal settlement
in the world.
There is no legal settlement.
There is no law in the world or interpretation of anywhere. Would you allow me to finish my sentence? There is no law in the world, other than perhaps in the minds of certain people, that makes Jewish settlement, Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria on state land or privately owned Jewish land illegal. You can say over and over and over again that Jewish communities are illegal, but that is 100% imaginary. There is no such law. The ICC can say it, and the UN can say it, and they can repeat it 1,000 times.
This is not a game of data, of watering it down. We're talking about people's lives here. You want to talk about settler violence. You want to talk about violence in the West Bank. We're not talking about data sets. We're talking about looking people in the eyes. And Malka, while you might misunderstand what Zionism is, and when you talk about I'm pretty clear on Zionism, but I don't think you're going to educate me about Zionism. The Uganda option, the only party that voted with Herzl was the religious Zionists to go to Uganda, because they saw that it was a need at the time to stop the pogroms against the Jews. Learn a bit of Zionism. But what you really don't understand is what extremist Judaism is doing and contaminating the Jewish people around the world. We have not seen this level of extremist terrorism coming out of our religion in the past. This is a threat to Jews in Israel. This is a threat to Jews around the world. Unless the authorities clamp down on it, unless people like you who claim to be normative respond to this violence, who call it out, go to the Palestinian villages and tell the innocent people, I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened to you. Put your bodies in the way for it happening. This isn't just about the security of Israel. This is about what it means to be Jewish.
And we're going to only have 3 minutes left. No, I'm going to actually not allow you to respond. I'm sorry. We only have 3 minutes left, and I think that we're not going to obviously solve the issue. But what we are going to do is think about how we can make this better, because the terrorist attack today in Gush Etzion and the violent events that happened yesterday by whether they're Israeli extremists or the mainstream, whatever you want to define it, is definitely not going to get us closer to living peacefully with our neighbors or security in this country. So this is a lightning round. Everybody has about 30, 45-second maximum to answer. Malka, we're going to start with you. If you could implement one concrete step in the next 6 months to reduce Jewish-Palestinian violence in Judea and Samaria, more policing, education, legal reforms, you tell me what it is, what would it be, and how do you make sure it works? Again, 30 to 45 seconds.
I would change the education system in Palestinian Authority-controlled areas, stop the pay for slay, make it that all the incitement and all the horrific violence that Palestinian Authority society is taught comes to an end, so that they will stop posing a threat to communities that are constantly forced to defend themselves.
Mosi.
first use the police and the army. They have to know that they have to act against violent people. They don't know. The chief of staff have said that. Second, I would change education in both nations, Israel and Palestine. Israel did not agree that the committee on the incitement will sit, because we know that we have incitement in our education. And third, I think that we have to start to talk about peace agreement. We cannot go on with this war. In the minute we
I'm going to stop you there. We have to start talking about a peace agreement. Go ahead, Naomi.
You'd be surprised to hear that I agree with Mossi Raz. We have always called for the same thing, equal and universal law enforcement. That is why we have a government. That's why we have a state. We don't want chaos. It's not good for anyone. We owe it to our children, our grandchildren, on both sides, to equally and universally enforce the law, use the tools that already exist to create security. So we can.
All right, Anton, wrap us up.
Mossi says that the solution starts with the police and the army, but in fact, Mossi, you know it's much higher than that, because if you go to bed with dogs, you wake up with fleas. And letting Ben-Gvir into the government, into the coalition, was a deeply irresponsible and radical move. We need elections fast, and we need a mainstream consensus that we do not let extremists and hooligans to command our police force or the civic administration in the West Bank.
Thank you for your sentiments. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we do have tonight. I want to thank you, Malka, Naomi, Anton, and of course, Mossi, for being here tonight for this very important conversation. If you found this discussion on settler violence and the future of Judea and Samaria valuable, please like, share, and of course, check out the ILTV podcast as well for more in-depth interviews on related subjects. I'm Maayan Hoffman. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Insider.
On December 8th, ILTV and Besheva are bringing one of Israel's most prestigious annual events, the Jerusalem Conference, to Miami. The conference will bring together leading figures from government, business, diplomacy, and Jewish organizations to address the most pressing issues facing Israel and the global Jewish community. More on this from ILTV's Maayan Hoffman.
Under the theme Stronger Together, the Jerusalem Conference in Miami will focus on strengthening the bond between Israel and the diaspora, exploring ways to deepen mutual understanding and solidarity during one of the most challenging periods in modern Jewish history. The December gathering will include high-level discussions on U.S.-Israel relations, the future of diaspora Jewry, and Israel's economic and national resilience during wartime. Senior U.S. and Israeli officials, including Ministers Yariv Levin, Amichai Shikli, and Miki Zohar, along with MK Simcha Rotman and Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon, will all take part. The event will also feature business leaders and philanthropists, including Simon Falek and his daughter, Tila Falek.
We feel like we need to support Israel unconditionally, and that is what we try to do.
The main conference will take place at the Beth Moshe Synagogue, where the Jerusalem Award will be represented to individuals and organizations that have demonstrated exceptional commitment to the people and land of Israel.
We see in the past years the shift of Jewish community. The centers are changing. It was New York in the past, and it's becoming Miami.
The shift, symbolic and geographic, reflects a new phase in global Jewish engagement, one in which Miami is emerging as a powerful hub for Israel advocacy and Jewish unity.
In the last 2 years, we learned that we must strengthen our connection, our solidarity. This event is part of this solidarity, part of this connection.
I think what we need to discuss is what we're seeing now in the far right. I see a deep challenge coming from actually neo-Nazis who are being normalized by very senior figures in the American conservative movement.
As the world grapples with rising anti-Semitism and the ongoing war against Hamas, the Jerusalem Conference in Miami aims to send one clear message: that the Jewish people are and must remain stronger together.
Americans for Ben-Gurion University brought resilience, hope, and humor to New York City benefit.
We are supporting a fabulous university that serves southern Israel, supporting their students, supporting their people.
campaign efforts.
A4BGU's New York City benefit celebrated 50 years of excellence at the Goldman Medical School, an institution renamed in honor of Lloyd Goldman's parents.
My sisters and I named in our parents, so it's the Joyce and Irving Goldman Medical School, and my sister Katja and my sister Dorian will be here this evening, and we are thrilled about peace, about Israel, and about Ben-Gurion University.
The Joyce and Arvie Goldman Family Foundation announced a $2 million matching grant to support the future of medicine, investing in BGU curriculum, students, and faculty. One of the universities that was hit hard was Ben-Gurion University. Hundreds of students found themselves returning to wear uniforms.
The university itself lost about 110 of its members and families on the 7th of October. And a number of our students and graduates were taken hostage by the Hamas, mainly from the Nova Music Festival. Over 6,000 of our students have been on reserve military duty. Some have been killed killed and wounded. It's been a difficult time, but we are resilient. We're going to move forward and make Israel better and stronger.
We heard the testimony of Sasha Trufanov, a Ben-Gurion University alumnus and hostage survivor who suffered 498 days in Hamas captivity.
Started hearing shootings coming closer and closer, voices of speaking, shouting. We thought we had a discussion between me and my fiancée, Sapir. She said it's Arabic. I said that no, it's Hebrew. I wanted to believe, like there are soldiers.
And a testimony of Noah Shuker, a fourth-year medical student and casualty officer in the IDF, that shared what the importance of A4BGU.
They make sure that we have everything we need. I can say, as a student who also been in reserve service for over 400 days, they made sure that I could really just stay on top of my studies, not miss any test. I didn't miss any lecture. I had everything that I need in terms of marathons and tutoring and psychological support. They really made sure that we would see social workers, and we had talks with regular talks with psychologists, making sure really that the university is doing everything they can to protect us and to keep us on top of our studies and in good shape.
You could feel the sense of mission and goodwill among those who came to support the people of Israel and Ben-Gurion University. The evening concluded with a powerful message to the people of Israel.
For me, the most important thing for Jews around the world is to go to Israel and share the love.
The United States is in lockstep, and there is a large part of the United States that loves Israel and will be behind them, whatever it is.
Back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Caleb Ben David, and here's your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman says Riyadh wants to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel, but only if that process includes a clear path towards a Palestinian state. Speaking alongside U.S. President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Ben Salman says the two leaders had a healthy discussion and are working to create the right situation for a pathway to a two-state solution. Trump says they discussed one-state and two-state options, adding that bin Salman has a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords. Bin Salman emphasized that Saudi Arabia wants peace for Israelis and Palestinians and a future where they both coexist peacefully.
So definitely we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing. And we want to be part of the Abraham Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that happen.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. We talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region. And we will do our best to reach that day.
President Trump also announced a new defense pact that will include the controversial sale of F-35 fighter jets to the Saudis, as well as a program to help it develop a civil nuclear program for the kingdom, which he designated as a major non-NATO ally of the U.S. Trump also asked bin Salman to join the new Board of Peace set to oversee the reconstruction and governance of Gaza, saying it would include the leaders of many major countries. A deadly attack in Judea yesterday, a combined ramming and stabbing at the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem, has left one man dead and 3 others wounded. 71-year-old Kiryat Arba resident Aharon Cohen was killed, and 3 others, a woman in her 40s, a 30-year-old man, and a 15-year-old boy, suffered moderate to serious injuries when 2 Palestinian terrorists rammed their vehicle into a crowd of civilians and then attempted to stab them before they were neutralized by security forces on the scene. Cohen was laid to rest last night in Kiryat Arba. A widower, he leaves behind 6 children and many grandchildren. According to the IDF and eyewitnesses, the terrorists, identified as 18-year-old Ibrahim Imran El-Atrash of Hebron and 18-year-old Walid Mohammed Khalil Sabane of Beit Ummah, arrived by car, accelerated into people standing near the junction, and then exited the vehicle with knives. Nearby IDF reservists reacted instantly, shooting and killing both attackers. Inside the terrorist car, security forces later discovered explosive materials, which were neutralized by Border Police bomb disposal units. Palestinian Islamic Jihad praised the attack, calling on Palestinians to escalate violence. Hamas called it a natural response, though neither group formally claimed responsibility. Prime Minister Netanyahu condemned the terror attack, saying in a statement that today we experienced another Palestinian terrorist attack, and we are determined to complete the war on all fronts, including disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials say 13 people were killed and 4 injured after an Israeli drone strike hit a Hamas training camp inside the Ain al-Hilway refugee camp near Sidon. It's the deadliest Israeli strike in Lebanon since the ceasefire began nearly a year ago. Lebanese media reported a vehicle at the entrance of the camp was hit by 3 missiles, with damage both inside and outside the vehicle. And that ends this update on ILTV, but you could stay with us throughout the day for the latest updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. And of course, you can also catch us on our ILTV app. There's the QR code on the screen. I'm Caleb Ben David, and thank you for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Caleb Ben David, and coming up in today's newscast, the UN approves the U.S. plan for creating a Gaza stabilization force. Trump gives the okay for F-35 sale to Saudi Arabia as MBS visits the White House. And who's behind the flights taking Palestinians from Gaza to South Africa? We start with news of a terror attack today at the Gush Etzion junction in Judea and Samaria, just south of Jerusalem. 2 terrorists carrying out a car ramming into a crowd, followed by a stabbing rampage. The terrorists were neutralized at the scene, but not before wounding 3 people who suffered light to moderate injuries and killing one man who was stabbed to death. Security forces found explosive device in the car after the attack. The United Nations Security Council has approved a sweeping U.S.-drafted resolution backing President Trump's Gaza plan, a vote Washington is calling historic, and one that sets the stage for an international stabilization force and a potential political horizon for Palestinians. ILTV's executive editor Mayan Hoffman has more.
At the UN in New York, the United States secured a major diplomatic victory, the Security Council voting 13-0, with Russia and China abstaining, to adopt a resolution endorsing President Trump's 20-point Gaza plan. The proposal includes a phased ceasefire, an international force to stabilize Gaza, and a transitional governance structure known as the Board of Peace. The U.S. representative framed the moment as a turning point after 2 years of devastating conflict. The resolution authorizes the deployment of an international stabilization force, largely drawn from Muslim-majority nations, to oversee demilitarization, maintain security, and escort humanitarian aid. It also outlines a World Bank-backed reconstruction fund and envisions a technocratic Palestinian committee managing day-to-day administration as the Palestinian Authority undergoes reforms. The text states that after those reforms and significant redevelopment, conditions may finally be in place for a credible path to Palestinian self-determination. While the Palestinian Authority welcomed the resolution and signaled readiness to participate, Hamas rejected it outright, calling the measure an attempt to impose international guardianship on Gaza and insisting it will not disarm. The group said resistance by all means remains legitimate until the, quote, occupation ends. In Israel, the political reaction exposed deep divisions. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated his government's opposition to Palestinian statehood, while far-right ministers condemned the plan as a threat to Israel's security. Others in the opposition accused the government of mismanaging the diplomatic process and allowing a statehood reference to advance. Still, Washington argues the alternative is a return to war, with the U.S. representative urging the Council to seize what he called a narrow window for stability.
This resolution, colleagues, is no mere paper promise. It's a lifeline. How could anyone be against it?
The United States says implementation begins immediately, and Monday's vote is only the start of a broader regional realignment.
President Trump is rolling out the red carpet today for Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, in a visit expected to advance the sale of F-35 fighter jets and a wide range of agreements and business deals. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Even before the arrival of MBS, President Trump made clear that the Saudis wanted to buy advanced F-35s and the U.S. planned to sell them to the kingdom.
Yeah, no, I am planning on doing that. Yeah. They want to buy. They've been a great ally. They've got to like us very much. Look at the Iran situation, what we did in terms of obliterating, we obliterated their nuclear capability. Yeah, I will say that we will be doing that. We'll be selling F-35s.
It will be MBS's first trip to the U.S. since the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents, a murder that triggered global outrage. The warm welcome in Washington marks a full repair of relations after years of strain. MBS will hold talks with Trump in the Oval Office, join him for lunch in the Cabinet Room, and attend a formal black-tie dinner tonight. The visit aims to capitalize on a Saudi pledge of $600 billion in U.S. investments. New deals in technology, manufacturing, defense, and more are expected. The Saudis have requested 48 of the stealth fighters. It would be the first sale of its kind to the kingdom, raising questions about the maintaining of Israel's qualitative military edge, as Israel is currently the only Middle Eastern country with F-35s. Beyond weapons, Riyadh is seeking security guarantees, access to advanced AI technology, and progress on a civilian nuclear program. The visit of MBS comes immediately after the Security Council resolution approving the Trump plan for Gaza that includes a pathway to Palestinian statehood. Trump is now expected to press MBS to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel.
And joining us now for more on the latest developments out of Israel and the region and the U.S. is Ari Harrow. He's the former chief of staff for Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Ron Campius. He's the former Washington bureau chief for JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. Ari, let me start with you. Prime Minister Netanyahu putting a positive spin on this plan that was approved by the UN, saying it could bring peace and prosperity to Gaza. But clearly there are some problematic elements in this plan for Israel. How should the government be reacting and dealing with it?
Well, firstly, I think that, we have to choose whether we want to look at this from an optimistic lens or a pessimistic lens. Anytime you have a plan that both the Israeli opposition and the coalition partners to the right attack equally, then you have to understand that somebody was trying to strike a balance here. What was passed in the United Nations yesterday really was, with a little additional detail, the plan that President Trump presented here in Israel that the entire nation stood and applauded for. It brought about the return of the hostages. We're still waiting on the remaining bodies that are in Gaza. But ultimately, this is the plan that Israel sought. It is the plan that Israel worked for, and it's a plan that Israel received. I think the mention of a Palestinian state is not inconceivable when you look at the co-sponsors of this plan to the United Nations. You look at countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Indonesia and other Muslim countries in the region. It's clear that you had to present them with sort of an olive leaf so that they can justify this type of activity in Gaza. And I think ultimately the proof is going to be in the pudding. Is Gaza going to be demilitarized? Is Hamas going to be dismantled? And is Israel going to respond and react if its security is threatened in the future?
Right, and you hear Ron Ari use that expression, an olive leaf, but I think that, as he says, that really depends on how much the Trump administration is going to press on issues like the disarming of Hamas and also on moving ahead on some kind of political horizon for the Palestinians. So in your view, how serious is the Trump administration on those key elements as seeing it as part of the overall plan?
I think that the Saudis make the Palestinian component more prominent. I don't think that the Saudis can move ahead without a pathway to some kind of pathway to Palestinian statehood, something that they can tell their constituents, and even though it's a monarchy, it's a dictatorial monarchy, they still have a constituency in the Muslim world. They consider themselves to be the guardians of the holy places of the Muslim world. I think they need something substantial. So as far as that goes, I think that Trump is gonna be quite serious about pressing towards the disarming of Hamas, the conditions that will pave that way, because his vision hinges on a comprehensive Middle East peace. That's what he sees as his ticket to the Nobel Peace Prize next year. And for that, he really needs the Saudis on board, and the Saudis need the path to Palestinian statehood.
Right, Ari, and let me ask you about that. Ron bringing up the importance, the prominence now of the Saudis and the influence they have, certainly in the White House, and we see this. We can relate this also to the sale of the F-35s, which is also something that could be problematic for Israel. How much do you think that influence that MBS has now in the White House may impact on decisions that, again, could be problematic to Israel?
I think we have to remember that the talks between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel did not start in the last few weeks or in the last few months. They started in Trump's first term in office. These are talks that have gone on and have gone into great detail by both sides for a very, very long time. I think that both sides at this moment are trying to, turn the screws a little bit further in their own direction, and everyone's trying to extract what is in their greatest interest from their own domestic points of view. And I think that it's not shocking from that perspective that Saudi Arabia has made these requests, and will make other requests as well. But don't forget that Israel remains the closest ally of the United States, definitely in the region and probably in the world. Trump has made it very clear, not only in word, but in action. And I think that ultimately, we have to remember that every time that the media and the public discourse questioned that support of Trump to Israel, it's been proven to be false. And I think that ultimately we will see Trump and his administration continue to support Israel in its vital needs. And it's a tightrope that they're going to have to walk with Saudi Arabia.
Ron, I think we can agree with Ari's point that you can't really question President Trump's personal commitment to the U.S.-Israel alliance. But the political atmosphere in Washington, the U.S., has changed regarding Israel overall, even in his own Republican Party. For example, I think we're both old enough to remember the AWAC sale by the Reagan administration to Saudi Arabia, which generated a much more of an active response from Israel, from its supporters in the U.S., AIPAC, the Jewish community, which does make me perhaps wonder about, beyond President Trump, that's U.S. support for Israel.
Yeah, I think Ari's right. I think, at the end of the day, that as long as Trump is president, it's going to come back to a strong support for Israel. The problem is that he's presiding over a Republican Party that is radically changing at its roots. There's a war going on now in terms of just all sorts of identity issues. So how the Republican Party defines itself in the grassroots, and Israel's a big component of that. I point to somebody who's very close to J.D. Vance, Rod Dreher, the philosopher, who wrote a long piece the other day about how he came to Washington and he had an assessment that 40% of the Zoomer age, the Generation Z age, Republicans are Groypers, or Groyper adjacent, and that refers to the anti-Semitic, very anti-Israel movement led by Nick Fuentes. So, we're talking short term. The prospects of something coming out of this now, I think it's pretty positive. Long term, Israel has a problem here.
Right. And Ari, certainly you could respond to that, but I also want to just get a sense. Okay, so these deals, this plan is moving forward. The F-35s are going to it. What should Israel expect realistically now from the U.S. in terms of pressing either the expansion of the Abraham Accords or some kind of further actions against Iran?
So, firstly, I definitely think that anyone who does not agree with Ron's caution as far as the day after Trump would be blind. I think that he's 100% right, and it's something that has led to tragedy for us here in Israel when we did not think a little bit further down the road. It is important for us to remember what Israel's strategic threats are at the moment. Obviously, strategic threats can change over time, and there's obviously some new ones on the horizon. But today, as we sit here, there still are two fundamental challenges that Israel faces. The first and foremost, from an existential perspective, is Iran. And Saudi Arabia is a key component of any type of action or any type of deterrence that both Israel and the United States want to create vis-a-vis Iran to deter them from rebuilding, renewing their nuclear aspirations. And I think that this fits into that immediate strategic need that we have. So that's point number one. Point number two, and to answer your question, is really with regard to Hamas. When we talk about Palestinian statehood or the path towards Palestinian statehood, what does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things. And I think that the immediate challenge and the immediate strategic imperative that Israel faces is showing the terrorist organization and showing any future leadership that terrorism not only does not pay off, but that it will be wiped out and dismantled from our vicinity. And I think that the challenge that Israel puts back in the United States' lap Israeli validation and verification that Hamas will not only not play a role, but that it will be demilitarized, that Gaza will be demilitarized, and that a better future can exist.
All right, gentlemen, I'll just conclude. As President Trump is so fond of saying, we'll see what happens. Certainly, these are going to be some challenging months ahead of us. Ari Harrow and Ron Campius, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jewish extremists reportedly torched vehicles and buildings in the Palestinian village of Jabba near Bethlehem. 3 vehicles and 3 structures were set on fire. No injuries were reported. It remains unclear whether the attack is connected to the early evacuation of the illegal Tzor Mizgavi outpost. Now, the incident erupted shortly after the evacuation of illegal structures near the settlement of Efrat. The IDF confirms it has launched a manhunt for dozens of Israelis accused of taking part in the attack. The army says security forces, including the IDF, border police, and Israeli police, rushed to the village of Jabba following reports that dozens of Israeli civilians had set fire to and vandalized homes and vehicles. The IDF stresses that all violence by Jewish extremists is, quote, grave and dangerous, warning that such acts undermine security and divert troops from critical defense and counter-terrorist missions. Prime Minister Netanyahu and other top Israeli officials expressed support for the army amid its pursuit of what they described as a small extremist group of Jewish assailants. Well, we are now hearing new details from freed hostage Avi Natan Or. He is speaking publicly about his failed escape attempt, the beatings that followed, and the rules he created to survive more than 2 years underground. Here's the story from ILTV correspondent India Naftali.
Avi Natan Or, whose kidnapping was seen across the world alongside his girlfriend Noa Argamani, is now sharing the most detailed account yet of his captivity. Avi Natan was held alone in Gaza's tunnels for 738 days until his release last month under the ceasefire deal.
I tried to escape. I dug for weeks through sandbags, through a collapsed tunnel, towards the surface. Then one night, I reached the outside. I saw stars for the first time in years. I rode hostage on a white sandbag, planning my next step. But they found out. They beat me for days.
To survive, Avi Natan said he created a set of rules for himself. 1. Be patient. 2. Find common ground. 3. Control anger. And 4. Keep the mind engaged. He said his engineering skills helped him track time and even build a small lamp from broken cables.
They tied me to a chair for a week. I was sure I would die there. But even then, I wrote 3 things next to my bed. This too shall pass, patient, and let it be. Those words kept me human.
He also spoke about discussing Torah and Quran stories with his captors, trying to find share points of faith as a way to stay grounded. Avi Natan was speaking alongside Noa Argamani, who was rescued in June 2024, and 2 other recently freed hostages, Guy Gilboa Dalal and Evitar David, at the Jewish Federations of North America General Assembly in Washington.
I want to thank the people who made this final hostage deal possible. Everyone involved, especially Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and President Trump.
The 4 former hostages are expected to meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Thursday, along with other hostages freed in last month's ceasefire.
And before we move on, I'm excited to announce the latest episode of ILTV's special series with Israel Bonds, One-on-One with Jonah Platt. This new episode features an exclusive conversation with Jonah Platt, an actor, writer, musician, and producer from Broadway and television, to his impactful podcast, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt. Now, he's emerged as one of the most important young Jewish voices in the aftermath of October 7th. Join us tonight at 9 p.m. Israel time or 2 p.m. Eastern time. Scan the QR code on your screen to RSVP and be among the first to watch. You won't want to miss this inspiring conversation. South Africa is raising alarm over 2 recent charter flights carrying more than 300 Palestinians from Gaza, Judea, and Samaria. The Foreign Ministry claim the arrivals are suspicious and part of what they call a clear agenda to cleanse Palestinians out of the region. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The passengers arrived in Johannesburg without Israeli departure stamps, leading South African authorities to hold one flight on the tarmac for 12 hours before granting entry. Reports in the South African media allege that a shadowy organization known as Al-Majd was involved in organizing the departures of both groups.
It does look like it represents a broader agenda to remove Palestinians from Palestine into many different parts of the world, and it's a clearly orchestrated operation. Because they are not only being sent to South Africa, there are other countries where such flights have been sent. So indeed, it's a matter that is being investigated, and we do not want any further flights to come our way.
Israel rejected the allegations of any wrongdoing. Kogat says the Palestinians have valid South African visas and that Israel simply facilitates exits for those who arrange third country resettlement. The Prime Minister's office had this to say.
South Africa's government has raised concerns about the arrival of a plane load of Palestinians from Gaza, with officials there saying the matter was under investigation. Steve, I'm reading the remaining response and question that you have here, specifically talking about Palestinians ending up in South Africa. I don't have much I can share with you on that, but the Prime Minister has made it clear that if Palestinians want to leave, they should be allowed to leave the Gaza Strip. And if they want to come back to the Gaza Strip, they should also be allowed to come back.
Germany says it will restart weapons exports to Israel following more than a month of ceasefire in Gaza. The German government confirms that arms shipments will resume from November 24th after Berlin suspended sales of any military equipment that could be used in Gaza back in August, a move made as Israel prepared its ground offensive into Gaza City. Germany, Israel's second largest arms supplier after the United States, says conditions have now stabilized under the first phase of the Israel-Hamas peace agreement, which took effect on October 10th.
Die mit der Pressemitteilung der Bundesregierung vom 8. August 2025 bekanntgegebenen Beschränkungen zum Rüstungsexport nach Israel werden aufgehoben. Die Aufhebung wird ab dem 24. November 2025 in Vollzug gesetzt. Und Hintergrund dessen ist, wir haben ja immer hier gesagt, wir werden im Lichte der Entwicklungen vor Ort diese Praxis überprüfen. Und wie Sie gerade selber ja schon erwähnt haben, seit dem 10. Oktober haben wir einen Waffenstillstand in Gaza und der hat sich auch grundsätzlich stabilisiert.
And let's take a look now at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 16 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 27 degrees Celsius or 81 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. And you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Caleb Ben David. Be well, and thank you so much for watching. Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments and security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. 11 years after he fell in battle in Gaza, Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body was finally returned by Hamas after it was recovered from a tunnel in Gaza. With the return of Golden and Lior Rudayev, the remains of 3 Israelis Ron Givley, Dror, Meni Godard, and Thai worker Sundisak Rinthalak still remain in Gaza. Israel and the U.S. have reportedly agreed on a deal that would provide safe passage to some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels underneath IDF-held areas of Rafah, and then have them deported to another country. But no nation has yet agreed to take them in. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir called for an external probe into the October 7th attack after a panel appointed by him concluded that the Army's internal investigations had proved inadequate. In the Knesset, Prime Minister Netanyahu argued against an official commission of inquiry amid protests in the gallery by family members who lost loved ones in the attack. In a wave of airstrikes, the IDF takes out Hezbollah military infrastructure in South Lebanon, including rocket launchers, and 3 Hezbollah operatives, among them Samir Ali Faki, who was engaged in weapons smuggling for the terror movement. The IDF has now eliminated 15 Hezbollah terrorists this month who were taking part in military activities in violation of the ceasefire agreement signed with the Lebanese government. The IDF's Arabic language spokesperson, Colonel Avichai Adrai, announced his retirement after 20 years. Adrai is Israel's most influential media figure in the Arab world and has won acclaim and threats for his effectiveness in presenting the IDF viewpoint throughout the Middle East. And now our big story. While the country rejoiced over the return of Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body from Gaza after 11 years, there were also troubling signs evident for Israel on multiple fronts. In Gaza, Hamas continues to retrench and rearm in those areas outside IDF control. Efforts to create a multinational Arab Muslim force to assume control of that territory are moving slow, with no nation yet accepting to take part. And the coordination between the U.S. and Israel over the post-war process in Gaza seems strained, evident in the wrangling over the fate of those Hamas terrorists still hiding out in IDF-held areas of Gaza. Meanwhile, on the northern front, Hezbollah is still trying to rebuild its military infrastructure in South Lebanon in violation of the ceasefire agreement with the Beirut government, necessitating continual IDF airstrikes across the border. And Hezbollah's patron, Iran, is moving ahead with rebuilding its nuclear facilities and defying international inspectors, increasing the odds of further conflict with Israel. Well, joining us to discuss these issues is Or Yisachar, Director of Research at the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Or, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Caleb.
Well, let's start with Gaza. The issue of these 200 terrorists, problem in and of itself, but emblematic of what seems to be almost a sort of make it up as you go along approach to issues that should have been resolved with the ceasefire agreement.
Right, and I think all parties understand that by the point where Hamas is part of the history books, we cannot actually end the war in Gaza. I think Israel and the administration speak in unison on this topic. We heard President Trump. Hamas can disarm peacefully, or we do it quickly and violently. We heard Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary Rubio saying point 13 of the ceasefire agreements clearly stipulates that demilitarization of Gaza and Hamas has to lay down its weapons. So all parties understand that it's not just wishful thinking. This is pivotal and central to President Trump's attempts to instill peace in the Middle East. If Israel wants to normalize with Saudi Arabia, you better get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood main implant in the Middle East. And I think secretly and under the radar, these Arab countries understand that. The 200 terrorists stuck in a tunnel, it's quite a remote issue. It's very local. My only advice for those who are concerned is to just imagine what would happen if, God forbid, 200 IDF soldiers would be stuck in a tunnel at the mercy of Hamas terrorists. What they would do with them, I think we all know the answer.
Right, and certainly the U.S. and Israel on the same page in wanting to get rid of Hamas. But maybe timetables are slightly off. The U.S. really wants to see this regional peace move ahead. The Trump administration making steps. For example, talk about building this big base in Israel that would house international troops. Certainly an answer to the security issues in Gaza, but is that in some ways perhaps a troubling precedent for Israel moving forward? After all, administrations change, U.S. priorities and Israel's always don't align.
Well, I think we have had U.S. military personnel presence in Israel for a while now, but this really is next level. And my first concern would be to the American electorate, before I'm worried about the Israeli point of view, as in I would very much look up into the average American asking themselves whether or not Americans should have boots on the ground in the Middle East. And I think the answer is no. What I think we're going forward with this is a military base, like leading from behind style, where they oversee.
Right, no
Israel's
boots
efforts.
and U.S. boots in Gaza. We should stress.
No
here.
U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza, and that's nothing Israel ever asked for.
Right.
The IDF can perfectly well handle with Hamas on its own in Gaza. And I think moving forward, we really do need to reimagine the available toolbox of solutions for Gaza. Within the Yellow Line, there have been talks on models or proofs of concept where certain cities will get sort of an autonomous state, such as Rafah or Bet Hanun or others, with the help of Abu Shabab or other militias. So by so doing, breaking the sort of the monopoly that Hamas has over the control of the Gaza Strip, and avoiding a situation where the Palestinian Authority is part of the future of Gaza. So if we can actually make that proof of concept happen, the Emirates or city-states in Gaza, we can definitely implement the same model elsewhere in Judea and Samaria. You're right, timetable, time is running out, and Israel certainly has to use the next 3 years with Trump in the White House to, as fast as they can, reach the normalization with Saudi Arabia, security agreement with Syria. This is at the top of the agenda for Israel and for the administration.
Right. Now, let's actually, since you mentioned Syria, let's move to the northern front. But let's start with Lebanon, because as dicey as things or tricky as these things may seem in Gaza, it's situation more severe, certainly in Lebanon, with Hezbollah trying to retrench in South Lebanon. It seems like one can't even call it a ceasefire agreement at this point. The IDF having to strike almost daily at Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon.
Absolutely, and we can see the guiding hand behind all of these attempts, as U.S. sources claim that Iran wired as much as $1 billion to Hezbollah over the past few months. So we can clearly see that Hezbollah is making a great deal of efforts to rearm, and Israel cannot accept that. Under the ceasefire agreement, we saw how Israel demanded and accepted not only that Hezbollah does not fire rockets at Israel, but that Hezbollah does not arm itself in order to prepare for the next war. And Israel has been enforcing this ceasefire agreement ever since, with much success. But we can see how Hezbollah's raison d'etre is to arm and sort of wage resistance against Israel. This is a huge problem for Israel and for Lebanon. The Lebanese government, Lebanese president, have already declared and pledged in August to disarm Hezbollah. And it seems that they could have gone to this point because of Israel's military action, because Israel was bleeding in Lebanon and fought against Hezbollah. And now the Iranian efforts in Lebanon are putting all of this in jeopardy. We heard voices in Israel and in Lebanon, the topmost ranks in government, who expressed serious interest in normalizing relations between Israel and Lebanon, something that is really unheard of. And Hezbollah's attempts to arm itself, to rearm itself, and Iran's attempt to help it do so are putting sticks in the wheels. And I do hope that the international community holds Iran accountable and Lebanon itself accountable to prevent Hezbollah from acting this way in its territory.
But there are some analysts who believe that the Lebanese army simply doesn't have the capability, even if the government would have the will, and believe a wider conflict between Israel and Hamas, another round of full-out fighting, is almost inevitable. Do you share that view?
Right. So I think it's interesting because in Lebanon, we increasingly see how voices point the finger at Hezbollah rather than at Israel. We not only, of course, not Shiites, who are the natural base of Hezbollah, but Christians and Druze and Sunnis who have had it with Hezbollah and Iran's attempt to militarize Lebanon. And they claim, we don't want Lebanon to be involved in those fights. I spoke to these people who analyze Lebanon. We heard them on TV. We heard how even the foreign minister of Lebanon says that Hezbollah is the main obstacle to peace. We heard the Lebanese president say, for example, every time we make one step forward, Israel comes and attacks. But then again, it's kind of starting the story halfway through. If the Lebanese government prevents Hezbollah and Iran from militarizing Lebanon, Israel would not have to attack. So this wheel sort of repeats itself, and the ultimate response is for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people to take responsibility over the territory. The U.S. offered help, France offered help, Israel offered help. But it seems like they have a common enemy now, which is Hezbollah and Iran. And now the main question is, how will the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government take control over their own territory, get rid of Iran's infiltration attempts within Lebanon, and march forward toward normalization with Israel? I think it will be a blessing for the region.
You mentioned Syria also has a common enemy with Iran, with Israel, and yet there are many in Israel who simply don't trust him, the former al-Qaeda figure, believe he's a leopard who can't change the spots. There was a meeting, almost a historic meeting, between President al-Shah and President Trump in the White House this week. But some of the things that President al-Shah said after the meeting or perhaps don't point in a positive direction, saying no, the IDF has to withdraw from those areas of South Syria. It went in after the Assad regime fell. No demilitarization of South Syria. What are the real prospects of even security cooperation with Syria?
Well, I think security cooperation is a step in the right direction, but it's a step far removed from where we are today. We know that Syria wants to normalize with Israel, not because they like Jerusalem too much, but because they understand that Jerusalem is the gateway to Washington. And we understand that Israel is interested in that as well. Syria can be the first domino stone on the way to normalizing with Saudi Arabia, a lesser country, so to speak, on the way to the great custodian of the holy places of Islam. And we see how Shara is trying to portray a more moderate figure of itself, playing basketball with the head of CENTCOM, but commander of CENTCOM. And we do see how he is, I don't know if desperately, but he is trying to plead the Trump administration. He will sign that agreement if he gets what he wants, if he can present to his people an achievement. And Israel is happy to talk about various arrangements to the Golan Heights, but I think the demands are clear. Recognize the Israeli Golan Heights, work with us to secure the Syrian Golan Heights, and protect the Druze minority in Syria. If you can do all these three things, you can. The dam is broken, and the dam will be broken on the way to full Israeli-Syrian cooperation. I wouldn't call it peace. I would call it a common sense security arrangement between these two countries, mutual recognition that's already a massive step.
Right. And briefly, Iran, you've mentioned it several times. Troubling signs there, too. Iran clearly trying to rebuild its nuclear facilities. Again, is it almost inevitable that Israel will have to resort to military force with or without the U.S. to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat?
Well, I think it's just proved the doctrine of peace through strength. I mean, both President Trump and Israel said over and over, if Iran does not stop nuclearizing, we will have to attack. And sure enough, at the end of those 60 days opportunity window that Trump gave them, and the 61st day, Israel attacked. And we see how the Iranians were shocked. They did not see this coming, but they are also determined to rebuild their nuclear facilities, and this cannot happen. So this also proved, on the other hand, the invalidity of the concept that we can sign a JCPOA, a nuclear agreement with Iran, like the West did in 2015. And there you have it. The agreement did not work. Last month in October, most of the clauses, what they call the sunset clauses, already expired. The deal itself will expire in 5 years, and Iran is more determined than ever to acquire nuclear weapons. So the correct formula here is to, yes, strive to diplomacy with Iran, but let's not delude ourselves that the regime will sort of give up on its nuclear ambitions. And so there has to be a muscle here that says if you don't stop nuclearizing, we can strike again and again and again until such time that you stop threatening Israel with destruction. You cannot have nuclear weapons. And I think the big achievement from the June war, the 12-day war, is that the American electorate understands that the nuclear Iran is a threat on the United States, not just on Israel.
All right, clearly challenges for Israel can remain on multiple fronts there. Or Yisachar, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. Israel's war against Hamas was fought on other fronts besides Gaza. This includes the media battlefield. Israel and its supporters pushed back against coverage that in many cases they saw as inaccurate, unfair, and biased. Among the worst offenders was the BBC, the UK public broadcaster with global reach. Now the BBC's two top executives have resigned after a recent internal report found fault with some BBC practices, including its coverage of the Gaza war, especially a documentary that focused on the son of a Hamas official. But while admitting some mistakes, the BBC chair is still pushing back on claims it has a bigger problem with its Israel coverage.
I don't think there's a systemic bias in anti-Israel. I mean, there are loads of arguments that suggest almost the opposite, you know. I think that we have issues, as I've talked about underlying problems, and we've made changes in leadership to try and deal with that. But I think, you know, it's worth talking about the scale of the BBC and how much it does and how much excellent, impartial journalism it does.
And joining us for more is Flor Hassan Nahum. She's a special envoy for Israel's foreign ministry, someone who frequently speaks out on behalf of Israel in these foreign media outlets, including the BBC. And Flor, you heard there the chair of the BBC, again, refuting the claim of a bigger problem, certainly when it comes to its coverage of Israel on the BBC. I mean, even with these resignations, which were prompted, let's be honest, more by their reporting of President Trump than their reporting on Israel, if changes is really coming to the BBC.
Well, I don't think so, because they seem pretty unrepentant. Tim Davie and Deborah Turness, who left, are saying, no, we don't have a bias problem. They don't have a bias problem. They retract 2 Gaza stories every week. The problem is that they put out the Gaza story, which is a blood libel on Israel. They get the facts wrong. They won't call Hamas terrorists. They take the numbers of the Hamas so-called health ministry and use it as fact. And they regurgitate the talking points of the terrorists. And they seem completely unrepentant. And with everything that's happened, with all the stories they've had to retract, let's talk about some example. Al-Ai Hospital, where they said that Israel killed 500 people, it turned out to be a Hamas rocket, and then all of a sudden only 7 people were dead. The blood libels of starvation and famine, which now have been retracted by the UN, but who's looking at the retractions? And as you mentioned earlier, the famous documentary with the poor little boy in Gaza who turned out to be the son of the terrorist regime, Hamas's one of the ministers. They weren't even unrepentant about that. The only thing that has caused them to move is the fact that they did something to Trump. But I want to remind everybody that there's actually been a report, the Assassin report, that came out about a year ago that did a 9 million word check on the BBC and BBC Arabia, and they found it to be wholly biased. This is AI, and this is cold analysis that found them to be completely biased. What more proof do they need? Right. And let's talk about the way this actually has impact in the real world, why we're talking it on Security Brief, because coverage of things like the Al-Ahli Hospital bombing actually started protests and riots throughout Europe, governments pressuring on Israel, arms boycotts dealing with Israel, something you deal with as an envoy. So we're talking about not just changing just public opinion, but actually impacting on policy when it comes to Israel's security. Absolutely. And even worse, they don't make the connection at all that the anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism around the world, and the UK especially, is connected to their negative coveraging, peddling blood libels about the only Jewish state in the world. Never mind the fact that there's real massacres and there's real genocide and there's real starvation going on in places like Sudan. Gets very little coverage. Right. So it's the obsession and the bias. Right. So what needs to be done? I mean, you certainly have been active in this field, but what could the Israeli government be doing more, the Jewish community be doing more to deal with these kind of issues, especially when it comes to a platform as influential as the BBC? Well, it would help if we actually had some type of strategy in this country for fighting the communications war. We don't. We don't have one central command of how to fight the communications war. You have the Foreign Ministry and you have the Prime Minister's office that hasn't had a spokesperson for a long time, only recently, and also has a National Directorate for Public Diplomacy without a head for over a year and a half. You'd think in the middle of a war, that would be important. I think what has to change, Kalev, is first of all the understanding here in Israel that this is a real war and that the answer to that real war can't be a nice to have. It's a need to have. That kind of Israeli mentality that it doesn't matter what they say about us, it's what we do on the ground. That has to change because we're living in a different world. We are in a hybrid war. The war is hybrid. It's both military and it's also narrative and it's also communication. And Israel is not even in the arena of the communications war. Right. I will note one thing. We should note the announcement of the retirement of Colonel Avichai Adrai from the IDF, someone who's been in this position for 20 years, who speaks Arabic, who's been I can think of actually no other figure in the Israeli government or military that had maintained the position of that kind of experience
experienced that continuity and was able to be as effective as he has been. So there is an example of what can be done when the right person is out there in the right place.
But that's the Army spokesperson unit.
Right.
The Army spokesperson unit have actually done a decent job. But if you're not in coordination with the Prime Minister's office, because you don't have a head of a public diplomacy directorate, and you're not all in the same message, and there's no central command, you can have fantastic people speaking in different forums, but if there's no real strategy or communications fighting this war, it's like all of us being soldiers shooting in a different direction. So whilst people like that have been amazing, and I will say something else, you know, Israel's image, if we are to be accused of being this aggressive military force, do we really need a man in a uniform being the spokesperson for the country? Just these things have to be thought about, how things look and how things and how the messaging is put out and by who and in what structure. We have none of it. We are all soldiers in a war without a military command, without a command structure. And that is something that the government has to wake up and change, because the real Third World War has already started, and it is in the media.
Well, certainly it is, and certainly the impact that the media's had on governments and public opinions. You could see no greater illustration than, for example, Israel's war against Hamas.
Absolutely. And the fact that Hamas has the sympathy of the world somehow,
right,
and not Israel, who was attacked, that is as much as an indication of the hatred of Israel, but it's also as much as an indication of the lack of strategy in Israel.
All right, Flor Hassan Nahum, thank you for joining us on Security Brief. And now a final word. The U.S. this week marked Veterans Day on November 11th, the national holiday honoring those who have served in the armed forces. Israel has no equivalent to this holiday, the closest being Yom HaZikaron, which, like the American Memorial Day, is focused on those who have fallen in service. Perhaps Israel felt it had no need for a specific day to honor veterans when the percentage of those who served in the IDF were once a clear majority of the population that was eligible to do so. But that number has dropped significantly in recent years to a minority figure, even as the burden of reserve duty to those who do serve has dramatically increased over the past 2 years. The government is now in the process of trying to help out those younger veterans with various benefits, most notably a bill moving through the Knesset that would provide special tax credits to IDF reservists. But the measure, first introduced this summer, has become stalled owing to a dispute between Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and the Likud over the terms of the tax credits and who qualifies for them, with both sides accusing the other of grandstanding for public approval. It's well past time for this infighting to stop and this bill to immediately become law, as reservists suffer under the financial burden of missing so many days of work and study since the start of the Gaza war. But of course, it is the height of hypocrisy for Smotrich and the rest of the government to claim sympathy for reservists, while at the same time they advance a new version of the Haredi enlistment bill that in actuality would strip away most of the real incentives to reduce the deferments given to the ultra-Orthodox sector. The IDF is suffering a real manpower crisis and needs to boost enlistment, and no amount of tax credits for reservists will compensate for all the days they've had to spend away from home, work, and family to make up for that shortfall. Now, the U.S. treatment of its veterans is certainly not without faults, but on America's Veterans Day, I do think of my late father, David Mandel, who after his service during World War II greatly benefited by the GI Bill of Rights that helped pay for his education, for the mortgage on his first home, and even the cost of my own education. Perhaps Israel doesn't need a Veterans Day or even a GI Bill of Rights, but it does need the government to respect the sacrifices of those who both serve and served, in giving them the benefits they deserve and penalizing those who fail to heed the call to duty. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. Now, before we continue, a quick word about how you can support independent journalism at ILTV. We're committed to bringing you original reporting and stories from Israel that often do not make it into the global spotlight. If you value diverse perspectives and reliable coverage, you can now subscribe through our app to help ILTV News grow. Just scan the QR code on your screen to help us expand our reporting. continue delivering the kind of journalism that informs, challenges, and connects. Your subscription helps us do more than report the news. It helps us ensure that stories from the region are told with depth, integrity, and clarity. With your support, we can continue building a space for journalism that informs, connects, and inspires. Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with Israel's Ministries of Aliyah and Integration, of Health, of the Negev Galilee and National Resilience, and the Jewish Agency for Israel, are back again with another MEDEX event, but this time in Australia. The wide range of services and opportunities featured at the MEDEX events highlight just how essential these gatherings are. ILTV's Devil Klein has more.
The MEDEX events are back and bigger than ever. This time it's the Jewish community of Australia taking center stage with the unique opportunity to connect and integrate into Israel's medical landscape. More than 100 physicians attended the MEDEX Australia events as Israel continues to expand its global initiative to recruit top medical talent.
The IMAP, the International Medical Aliyah program, continues to grow and expand worldwide, and we're now in Australia. It is an honor to be part of this vital program and a privilege to meet such inspiring Olim.
Israel is facing a critical shortage of medical professionals, and the MEDEX events are helping to address that need. These gatherings offer physicians a streamlined, one-stop shop experience, including credential recognition, job interviews with Israel's leading healthcare institutions, and guidance on grants, licensing, and relocation, all under one roof. The MEDEX events, an initiative of the International Medical Aliyah program, offers a service unlike any other. And with the inauguration of the Australia MEDEX event, these opportunities are nothing short of revolutionary.
MEDEX has set up some interviews for me to be able to sit. I've been able to do my documents to get notarized. I've met with the Ministry of Health, so MEDEX has organised something that I can come to as a one-off stop, and I'll be ready to make Aliyah next year.
For some, MEDEX is more than just a networking opportunity. It also offers the chance to integrate into Israeli society.
The future for our children is Israel, and I also think that if you're going to integrate into Israeli society, you need to come over, you need to work in Hebrew, and I guess that's the only way you're really going to be able to improve your language enough to be able to fit in life.
Sometimes what sticks the most with the attendees at the event are the fast and efficient services that are usually a headache.
It's been incredibly practical. So just over there, there's 10, 15 different hospitals in Kupat Khalim that we've been able to meet with. So I've met with sort of 5 or 6 of them and gotten a sense of how they work and how I might be able to get a job there one day, and training and all that sort of thing. And I've got my degree with me here, and I'm in line to try and get it notarized as well, which just streamlines the process, which has been really great.
After multiple successful MEDEX events across North America and Europe, the IMAP program aims to expand even further, reaching even the farthest communities like the one down under. Israel's Minister of Aliyah and Integration, MK Ophir Sofer, said he expects the MEDEX events to grow rapidly across the globe. But it's not just the attending physicians that gain something from this event. The MEDEX event showcases another step in reinforcing national resilience, not only in security, but also in health.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Caleb Ben David, and here's your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman says Riyadh wants to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel, but only if that process includes a clear path towards a Palestinian state. Speaking alongside U.S. President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Ben Salman says the two leaders had a healthy discussion. and are working to create the right situation for a pathway to a two-state solution. Trump says they discussed one-state and two-state options, adding that bin Salman has a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords. Bin Salman emphasized that Saudi Arabia wants peace for Israelis and Palestinians and a future where they both coexist peacefully.
So definitely we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing, and we want to be part of the Abraham Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. We talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region, and we will do our best to reach that day.
President Trump also announced a new defense pact that will include the controversial sale of F-35 fighter jets to the Saudis, as well as a program to help it develop a civil nuclear program for the kingdom, which he designated as a major non-NATO ally of the U.S. Trump also asked bin Salman to join the new Board of Peace set to oversee the reconstruction governance of Gaza, saying it would include the leaders of many major countries. A deadly attack in Judea yesterday, a combined ramming and stabbing at the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem, has left one man dead and 3 others wounded. 71-year-old Kiryat Arba resident Aharon Cohen was killed, and 3 others, a woman in her 40s, a 30-year-old man, and a 15-year-old boy, suffered moderate to serious injuries when 2 Palestinian terrorists rammed their vehicle into a crowd of civilians and then attempted to stab them before they were neutralized by security forces on the scene. Cohen was laid to rest last night in Kiryat Arba. A widower, he leaves behind 6 children and many grandchildren. According to the IDF and eyewitnesses, the terrorists, identified as 18-year-old Ibrahim Imran El-Atrash of Hebron and 18-year-old Walid Mohammed Khalil Sobane of Beit Ummah, arrived by car, accelerated into people standing near the junction, and then exited the vehicle with knives. Nearby IDF reservists reacted instantly, shooting and killing both attackers. Inside the terrorist car, security forces later discovered explosive materials, which were neutralized by Border Police bomb disposal units. Palestinian Islamic Jihad praised the attack, calling on Palestinians to escalate violence. Hamas called it a natural response, though neither group formally claimed responsibility. Prime Minister Netanyahu condemned the terror attack, saying in a statement that today we experienced another Palestinian terrorist attack, and we are determined to complete the war on all fronts, including disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials say 13 people were killed and 4 injured after an Israeli drone strike hit a Hamas training camp inside the Ain al-Hilweh refugee camp near Sidon. It's the deadliest Israeli strike in Lebanon since the ceasefire began nearly a year ago. Lebanese media reported a vehicle at the entrance of the camp was hit by 3 missiles, with damage both inside and outside the vehicle. And that ends this update on ILTV, but you could stay with us throughout the day for the latest updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. And of course, you can also catch us on our ILTV app. There's the QR code on the screen. I'm Caleb Ben David, and thank you for watching.
After 11 long years, the body of Lieutenant Hadar Golding has finally come home as chilling new testimony emerges from hostages and horrific sexual abuse. With Hamas refusing to disarm and these revelations shaking the nation to its core, is Israel on the brink of a final decisive confrontation? And in New York, a shocking leaked video reveals who's funding newly elected anti-Israel Mayor Mamdani, God help us. We're unpacking it all right here on The Quad. Welcome back, everybody, to The Quad. And here in our Jerusalem studios, with my wonderful co-hosts, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskell, founder of Chokhmat Nashim, Elevating Orthodox Women's Voices, and a special guest co-host all the way from London, Stephen Phillips. You may know him as Lord Stephen Phillips from X, but he is the executive director of Jewish ERGs, and he's going to explain to us what that is a little later. Welcome back. And we have a show for you. Hadar Golding's remains come back to Israel after 11 years, after an incessant campaign by his family and, of course, Hamas as ever trying to do tricks in the last minute not to return the body. And on top of all of that, we have these harrowing tales of sexual abuse coming from one of the captives who came back. Look at this.
הפשיטו אותי עם כל הבגדים, תחתונים, הכל. קשרו אותי עם אלימות מינית, וזה בעיקר המטרה שלה להשפיל. המטרה שלו הייתה להשפיל אותי, לדרוך לי את הכבוד, וזה בול מה שהוא עשה. כן, וזה קשה, זה היה הדבר הנוראי. זה משהו שהנאצים לא עשו אותו.
But as Hamas is refusing to disarm, are we looking into another showdown? We're seeing what's going on in Lebanon. They're rearming. They're moving south. Are we going to see a second round of this whole entire war? Again, Emily, what do you have to say?
Yes.
Again?
Yes. Oh, I do think we will see another round. And
of everything?
Well, yeah, because I mean, we already know that from like literally within days of the Iran-Israel conflict ending in June, they were trying to build up a new proxy in Sudan. They have just in the past year, despite all of the sanctions, despite all of the obstacles that the regime is facing in Iran, they've sent over $1 billion worth to Hezbollah to rebuild in Lebanon. So of course it's going to happen.
Meanwhile,
you have Hamas that hasn't been completely obliterated, another proxy of the regime. It's not going to go until the regime goes.
Sending $1 billion with a country which is starving and thirsty. And this is what we have in Iran. Lebanon, the Lebanese army haven't managed to control the Hezbollah forces. They had a golden opportunity. And what's going to happen with Syria, God knows, because Al-Jarrah, or whatever his name is, Jolani, is playing basketball in the White House. Shoshana.
I don't even know what to say. I feel like I don't. Emily usually is very on point with these things, so I'm a little bit sad to hear her say yes, because I'm like, no, like I just got the mamad cleaned out. Like I just got used to not hearing sirens and not worrying about where my kids were and not thinking about all the chayalim. Like it's almost like it's too good to be true that they're all going to come home and bury, and the ones who are still not home. And round two, this is round 67, 30 million. Like, I don't know. How do you get rid of Hezbollah when they don't want to be gotten rid of? How do you get rid of Iran when they don't want to be gotten rid of? I don't have an answer. I don't know.
Well, unless you assist the people in overthrowing the Islamic Republic of Iran, as they have been begging for 40
what does that look like? Honestly,
yeah,
what would
it looks like investing in infrastructure that can supply internet to them in the times of protest. It looks like, if possible, arming them. It looks like supporting opposition groups in order to have a united opposition. It looks like full enforcement of sanctions and holding regimes like Russia and China accountable for sanction evasion. I mean, their oil exports are the highest that they've been since 2015 in the last year. How do you explain that?
Didn't they
at a time when there's unprecedented sanctions?
Didn't we just, they just put the sanctions back on them. So
but no one is enforcing those who are helping them evade, like China and like Russia.
And ultimately, they're the head of the snake, and all of the exported terrorism is coming from them. But I think the difference is now, at least with Gaza, that we're on that yellow line, which is 53% of the strip, and we're not moving. And these people are not rearming. And so if it only means that we've enclosed the terrorists a little bit more, and they now have to worry about how they manage their own people, which is going to be a big challenge for them, not us, maybe that's a little bit of a victory. Stephen, welcome.
I think the saddest thing for me, and thank you for having me, what a badass collection of people to be standing next to. The saddest thing for me is to hear me say, yes, because this is my 4th trip to Israel since the war started. I was here on October 7th. There's a whole collection of things that happened. And this is the first time it feels like the cloud has just shuffled and shifted away a little bit. I landed, you haven't got so many faces, it's just a few. and everything feels a little bit more whatever normal is in this
Post.
country. I'm not sure what normal is here.
Yeah.
But it does feel a bit post. So to hear Emily kind of, yes, is like, oi, I don't think we can do it as well. How many chocolate bars can we send you? Like, really, it's enough.
I think we're just realistic, and ultimately you're dealing with a mentality that doesn't believe in peace, they just believe in hudna, which is the peace between the wars, which is basically what Israel has gotten used to, our whole entire modern state existence here, the peace between the wars, and that's how we incredibly thrive as an economy. By the way, people don't talk about this, and they want to be doom and gloom about Israel's economy. The Israeli shekel is the strongest it's been, and a war hasn't knocked it down. Now, why is that? People are asking, why is that? Because very quietly, there's so much investment. There's so many AI data centers being done quietly. NVIDIA has invested so much money here. The concentration of AI talent in the world is here. And so, you can hate us all you want, but ultimately, we hold here a lot of that database intelligence that is going to be running the world. And people don't seem to understand that when you want to boycott us, you're in fact boycotting yourselves, which brings me to Mandani. My God, I was in New York last week. And I started the day I met with some Jewish friends of mine who'd been very involved in the Cuomo campaign. And at the beginning of the day, everybody was a little positive that maybe, like Trump, the polls got it wrong and people didn't want to admit they were voting for Cuomo. And then as the day progressed, it got increasingly...
It wasn't a landslide, but because there was the additional... Because they had SOA, so it was...
Yeah, but
even if he had went in there, he would have lost by 32,000 votes.
It still would have lost. I blame the Jews for Mandani, to be honest, but that's a whole other thing. But guess
there aren't that many Jews in
Cuomo
Europe.
was not a good candidate.
He was never...
Well, for sure. You could blame the Democrats.
When you have a person who is, an alleged sex predator, that's not exactly a great candidate to run.
He's right.
No.
It's true.
It
Once
wasn't...
you're back choices, no one wins.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, New York definitely lost, and the Social Democrats of America have got their little laundry list of what they want Mandani to do.
They're just going forward with their plan.
But everything, there's not one thing that hasn't got something to do with boycotting Israel.
Yeah.
Not one thing. Not the free buses. I mean, these are the Social Democrats of America. So nothing to do with socialism, only to do with Jew hatred, because that was their agenda all along. And guess who admitted was helping Mandani all along? The very biggest scumbag that we've had many, many times, but we're not going to dedicate too much time to her, Linda Sarsour.
And Care.
And Care.
Right now, I'm a little more quiet because I'm on the quiet side of this race, but I'm going to tell you that once November 4th comes around, I will tell the story. The story is not just, that it's random that Zahran ascended to this place. It is our Muslim American communities. And I'll also say that it's Muslim money. The PACs that have supported Zahran, or a particular PAC that has supported Zahran, is probably over 80% of Muslim American donors in this country, high net donors, grassroots donors. And I want to make the point that the Unity and Justice Fund PAC, which is the CARE Super PAC, was the largest institutional donor to the pro-Zahran PAC in New York.
So basically, Mandani, as I think Bellamy said last week, is the perfect, he's the baby of wokeism and Islamism. They would have had a baby. That's Mandani. And that's what we have. What's going on in London with your mayor?
It's great. We love it. It's really wonderful. I recommend it. It's really funny to me. I've spent a lot of time in New York as well this year. And New York is always crazy, right? But as the election got closer, I was there just before Rosh Hashanah, and it felt crazier than it had ever been. It was like they were preparing for the next round of crazy. But I think they fancy us. They're so obsessed with us. I can't think of any other reason why. They just won't leave us alone. What are they with the Jews? They don't want to be us? What is this? It's crazy.
I really don't.
What's crazy is it's happening on the right and the left right now. Everyone is obsessed with us. Either they love us or they hate us, but there's nothing else in the universe. Apparently, there are no other issues in America other than Israel.
Or Sudan or Nigeria.
It's the only thing going on, and that's really a very scary thing. The other day I went to the cinema. I never go to the cinema anymore. But I went to the cinema to watch a really good film that I recommended everybody watch called Nuremberg. So it was all about how...
sounds uplifting.
No, but it was...
Nice light film.
Very light, very light. Rom-com. But it was No, but it's very relevant to today because it was basically all about how they got to the idea of trying the Nazis under what jurisdiction and how this could be an international. Now, in Israel, there's a debate. How do we try the Nukhba terrorists? How do we do it? What is the mechanism that we do? Do we actually put them to death? Which I think everybody around the table agrees that we should.
All about yeses today.
Is there going to be a war? Yes. Should we try the Nukhba terrorists and hang them? Yes. And should Israel be stopping Lebanon or the Hezbollah in Lebanon in its tracks? We've gone back to basically trying to bomb them, to go back to their lines. And of course, the world is accusing us of breaking the ceasefire, even though they broke the ceasefire by rearming. And so where is this all going to end?
Ceasefire, they're breaking international law. They're breaking 2 different UN resolutions.
They're breaking the one of moving?
No, one in 1559.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Which is disarmament. Yeah, shocking.
Yes. And the international troops that were placed there, I mean, they were completely useless, UNIFIL.
Yeah.
They don't have a UNIFIL now. I don't know who's monitoring whatever ceasefire it is, but it's almost like the world wills it to be a ceasefire. We also want a ceasefire, but the reality of the situation is that these jihadists have momentum. And the reason why they have momentum is because of Mandani and the fact that the world is going along with this craziness. Where will it end?
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't think we want a ceasefire. We want peace. We happen to accept a ceasefire because it gives us some quiet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the hard truth. They don't want either, really.
They don't want either.
They just want, like you said before, the peace,
Rearm.
the peace between the pieces.
Yes. The peace between the wars.
Yeah.
It's really kind of depressing.
Lebanon's government actually, I think, for a long time did not say anything when we were taking out terrorists, because they really do want, I think, they don't want Hezbollah, that they want them out, but they really just seem incapable of joining that officially because of all of the pressure around them and all of the...
Well, somebody explained it to me and they said maybe they just don't know how. They've been so many years. They've had this state within a state. They've had Hezbollah literally here, that they don't know how.
I don't know.
And remember, Hezbollah is very integrated in the government itself.
Exactly.
I mean, they've held this entire country hostage. And I want to clarify again for anyone watching that when we say Hezbollah, we mean the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah.
That's who's occupying Lebanon.
Yes.
And that's who's behind it. That's who's funding it.
Yes.
And that's been their mission from day one with the establishment of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it's a disaster for Lebanon.
It's a disaster for Lebanon. And unfortunately, they're on our border. And we have wonderful people in the north of Israel trying to rebuild these communities.
Yeah.
In a new light, with vision, to try and really resuscitate, but also make the North thrive. We have the same down south. I mean, this can be an opportunity for Israel, but if we still have these people and these threats,
right,
what are we going to do?
They've gone home. I've got friends that live on the border. They were away for like a year and a half.
Yes, they were not
living in these crazy conditions with parents and all sorts. All the kids
in hotels.
In hotels. All my friends were in their parents on the kibbutz. It was like 1,000 people in one tiny house.
Yes.
They want to go back, but they can't go back if someone's literally like peeping over the border at them, going to fire at them. It's crazy.
This is the problem. This is my criticism of the Israeli government for many years, both in Gaza and in Lebanon and elsewhere, that like we're mowing the grass. And it doesn't, it's just over and over and over again, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021, and also now. Like okay, yeah, you have a few years of calm. You have a few years of peace where these societies can advance or, these communities can rebuild in some cases. And that's great. It's better than a constant state of war. But at the same time, like, if you're going to have to fight a war, then just finish the job. Like, why does our government never finish the job?
Well,
and I know now there was political considerations with the relationship with the United States,
yeah.
but they could have done it before. Why didn't Netanyahu deal with this before any of the other times?
But isn't there a vacuum? Like, let's say, okay, so you get rid of Hamas. Who comes in next?
Don't get rid of Hamas. Get rid of the head of the snake.
Well, I'm with you on Iran, by the way. The sadness for me was that we finished the war with Iran when we did, and we didn't go all the way and kill Khamenei. And the reason we didn't was because the Americans didn't want us to go all the way. And the reason the Americans didn't want us to go all the way is because their own flank of the Republican Party, the isolationist flank, who think somehow they're there to do us a favor rather than the fact that, we're doing them a favor, stopped us. And that's, to me, I was very sad for the Iranian people that we didn't help them. But again, who comes in there? Who comes in place?
Right.
Well, inside of Iran, I mean, I think that you could do a whole episode on only this. There's a lot of different opinions. In terms of a single figure, yeah, he's the most popular, but even that, I don't know that he has a majority of people, or we don't know that he has a majority of people inside of Iran. But there is an entire transition plan that he has put forward, not to rule, but to oversee an interim period in order to have a referendum. So there is a lot of planning that's going into that, and they're trying to work with the U.S. government as well as other European governments, and they've made some progress. But the thing that's standing in the way is the West. That is they don't need them to start a war and overthrow the regime. They need them to stop propping up the Islamic Republic, which they continue to do, whether it's through non-enforcement or other deals that they're making. And we've seen it happen time and time again. And it's going to keep happening. And one more thing I want to mention that's really important to understand is that the Houthis stated yesterday that they would start bombing Israel again if they see that the Gaza ceasefire is not holding. You know, we've kind of like mocked the Houthis and made fun of their, ballistic missiles that are being fired here and there. And of course, they're dancing.
We don't take them seriously.
We need more dancing. I would more dancing.
Yeah.
We really are. I haven't seen a video.
And not
they haven't had a dancing video in a long time. Like, we need another dancing video for our,
sanity.
Sanity. Yeah. I love the thought of they sit around the camp, like, which department do you want to be in? I want to fire missiles. I want to be the dancing troupe.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And they go onto the boats with the Israeli flag. Yeah.
Insane.
Looks like a party. But in any case, we know that Iran is pouring whatever resources they have, or I should say the Islamic regime is pouring whatever resources they have into the Houthis and these proxies, and they're going to build them up. Why? Because even with all of our bombing campaigns and the United States of America bombing Yemen, we didn't do anything effectively. We didn't really do anything in terms of actually knocking out the Houthis, which means that now the Islamic Republic is going to double down on the Houthis, and it's going to be worse because, again, all we did was mow the grass.
But, I mean, don't they have their own problems? I heard...
no, nothing matters but us.
That they're starving. They've got no water, and in 2 months, they're going to run out of money and have to move the capital, Tehran.
Yeah.
You're in a situation where you're moving your capital, and you think you won, and you're still exporting terrorism and $1 billion? Isn't this, like, honestly not sustainable? I don't understand how they're still being...
The whole movement's suicidal. They're not looking for sustainability. They're suicidal. They're suicidal, like, on the individual level. They're suicidal on the national level. Of course it makes no sense to us. We're just like, build, create, fix. And they're just like, ruin, destroy, kill. But that's what they do. So yes, it's not sustainable, and they will not ever change. And so my question in the end is, like, Emily, I hear you, I agree with you. We have to finish it. We have to get the world to stop propping them up. But, like,
how?
Like, this is like a runaway train that has no brakes. There's no brakes. There's no emergency brake. They're not even on a track anymore. They're just whatever they can destroy, they're going to destroy. So what do you do?
Unlike Afghanistan, unlike Iraq, Iran has a different history, and the people want something different. And this is a huge population that has already shown that they're capable of running a country much more properly than what is happening now. So we need to have a united front against the Islamic Republic. That includes cutting off diplomatic relations. What is Europe doing? Yeah. What are they doing? Why are they still even allowing embassies?
No strategy. There's no strategy for regime change. Yeah. That's the problem. Yeah. They kind of, like you said, they just want to manage them rather than actually get rid of them, which we should be doing for their own people. Forget us, forget the world. I mean, they are the unstable force of the world, but their own people are miserable, starving and thirsty.
And their own people want a revolution, not reform. After the Green Revolution, I think pretty much everybody ruled that out. And they saw that the Islamic Republic itself, and even if you look at the structure of the regime, everything goes back to the Ayatollah. Everything goes back to the principle of Islamic jurisprudence, it's called in English. Everything is the entire structure is built like this. Yes. There is no reforming that. No. There's no reforming that. The only option is bringing down the regime.
Absolutely. There's no reform. The reformists are fake. I mean, their children are having a whale of a time in Europe and America, but everybody else is miserable in that country. And so here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in the Middle East. We believed that we destroyed the Ring of Fire, which was the architects were Iran. We have enemies of Hamas in the south that now looks like have been seriously weakened. At least we have a buffer zone, but they're not gone. 150 of them are stuck in a tunnel, which, by the way, they wanted to use to negotiate for the body of Hadal Golding until actually even Turkey had to get involved and say, no.
So I
Yes,
could think
but now
it's a bad
Turkey said
idea.
they're civilians, that there's 150 to 200 civilians
Yes,
in the tunnel.
civilians strapped in explosives in the tunnel. Yes, the civilians. At least we know that they've stored away enough food to feed themselves. And I'm very, very pleased that Israel is standing strong with either surrender or die. And really, we cannot let these people go.
Agreed.
And, you know, I keep hearing that the Americans want us to use this as a model for providing immunity so that Hamas can go and leave. And this is going to be like the little pilot project. No. Terrorists who are stuck in a tunnel, who tortured our hostages, who killed our soldiers, are not going to get a free pass to a 5-star hotel in Egypt. Because you're asking us to. And that is something that, honestly, I would go in the streets to protest against. And I think that there's consensus in this country. And so here it is, another week in wonderful sunny Israel that you chose to fly into. At least the flights are back. The flights are back, ladies and gentlemen. Really?
Yeah, I had 3 seats to myself.
Oh my!
I don't know what El Al are doing, but they had a new 777.
They're being forced to compete.
No, they're being forced to compete again. It's
Sure, because the others are back.
They put a new flight in, which with the others back, I don't really understand, but had 3 seats to myself. I was in poor person business class. When you stretch out, it costs 3 seats.
Oh.
And that's the only reason really I'm here. It cost me like nothing to come.
Oh, that's good to know.
Why be sad in London when you can be in the
Well, that's exactly. Despite all of that,
That's our
you
tagline.
walk down the majority of the streets in Tel Aviv or the Shuk in Jerusalem, and you're still having a whale of a good time here in Israel. All right, well, now we have so many scumbags to talk about. We go on to our favorite segment, Scumbag of the Week. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Scumbag of the Week. I have to say, I get stopped down the street regularly, Scumbag of the Week. And people come up to me and volunteer scumbags all the time. I enjoy it all. And here we are back with the Scumbag of the Week, Shoshana.
My scumbags of the week. I was actually in Paris 2 weeks ago. When I wasn't here, I was in Paris and then London. And so it was really shocking a little bit, even more so, to see this video. My scumbags of the week are the people who set flares inside the performance of the Israeli Philharmonic in Paris. Watch this. It's terrifying. Like, you don't know what you're looking at, and there's like fire in a there's fire, flames shooting in Paris, and you know, obviously you can be anywhere at any time, but like it was a little bit close that I was not that close to me, but close to the people who were there. I've loved Paris. I had a great time, even though I was doing some difficult work, and they are my scumbags for being just complete buttholes. Sorry, I can't say scumbags of the week.
That's and you have scumbag.
I know, but I want to think there's so many other words.
Oh, yes.
But the Philharmonic responded by playing Hatikva, which is like so Israeli. And their audience stood up, and it was just like, oh, they did flares in the middle of the performance. Okay, now we're going to do Hatikva. Everyone's going to stand up. The Israelis, the Jews were just like, this is just another Tuesday. So you're my scumbags of the week. And that's probably the biggest thing you'll ever do in your lives.
You know, it's amazing how these scumbags are basically ruining every cultural experience.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling that people are getting a bit fed up about it. I mean, I hope.
I hope so.
I mean, I'm fed up of watching it already. People are just, regular people.
What's that chant that they do in Britain?
Oh, we're going to talk about that in a second.
How do you say it in French?
Ooh, let me think about that. Okay. Stephen, your first ever, I mean, on the show.
On the show.
Yeah.
I've had many scumbags in my life, believe me. And I know Emily was there, so this is going to be a fun one. But I particularly want my scumbag this week to be Chief Constable Craig Guilford of the West Midlands Police. And the reason for him is I'm a football fan. People don't often think that about me, but I'm a diehard Leyton Orient supporter, which I should have got help for years ago.
Leyton
Orient.
Leyton Orient. I know, Judge. No one's heard of them around here, so it's fine.
No.
But Chris Guilford, my dad's generational trauma, Jews, basically. I look after their Jewish supporters club as well, which is a new thing we started because I don't do enough Jewish groups in the day. I do them at night as well.
Enough for the Jewish people.
No, I really am. No Jews here. But Chief Constable decided on Wednesday before the match to put a statement out about how it was related to the hooliganism. That was the reason that they weren't...
The hooliganism of
the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans was the reason they weren't allowing them there.
Yeah.
Now, I've read the reports from Amsterdam, which is what this was based on, and it wasn't about the Jews. It was about the Jews being beaten up and being in hospital. And then I watched what happened because I was here. I would have been there with the other amazing people that went and counter-protested like Emily, but I was in the sun. It's difficult decisions. And I looked at what happened. There was 10 arrests. One was a firework thrown into the ground. 2 were racially aggravated hate towards the Jews. And one was someone not taking their mask off. Now, I've been with people like Emily protesting, we don't wear masks, so we know what was going on there. And then also outside were people saying things like, we should not have mercy on the Maccabi fans who are IDF killers. So really, Mr. Chief Inspector, who's also currently being investigated for allegations of discrimination.
Ah, there you go. For who? Discriminating on who?
Racism and homophobia.
Oh, okay.
So really, was it the Jews? I don't think so. So you just are my scumbag this week.
Absolutely. The minute I saw that video, I thought, what BS? This guy's now justifying retroactively a decision about hooliganism that never happened.
It got overturned. Maccabi Tel Aviv were offered tickets and said, actually,
no, we don't want, because you can't protect us.
Right.
And they were right. Wow. Emily, that brings us to your scumbags.
Yes, so my scumbags were the protesters at the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv game. Now, just so everyone understands the context, who maybe doesn't follow all of English football.
First of all, I'm very impressed you said football and not soccer.
Correct.
So well done, Emily.
I always say that. It's a habit, I guess, now. But yeah, so they actually banned all fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv under the false premise that, you know, there was too much hooliganism, which is highly ironic when you look at some of the racist and sexist and homophobic and pro-violence chants that we hear from pretty much every football club in the UK, and not just in the UK, in the whole world. Like, if you look at what they're actually chanting in, like, South America, as I'm sure you know, it's craziness.
The whole thing's crazy.
I mean, Israel's got nothing on some of the stuff that's going on, so it's ridiculous.
We invented it, and we invented the things that come.
You're the OGs.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I did end up getting tickets to this game as an Aston Villa fan, not for Maccabi Tel Aviv. That section was completely empty in the stadium.
They closed the entire section?
Yeah, it was empty.
That's ridiculous.
The pictures are crazy.
Yeah.
Like half the ground is just nothing.
Yeah.
So you had to get a ticket as an Aston Villa fan?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And I cheered for Aston Villa, and I'll tell you why. Because the club was against this ban.
Yeah.
Their fans were against this ban. And the fans who were actually in the stadium were extremely supportive. They were even supportive of Maccabi Tel Aviv. Of course, they weren't cheering for them, but they were respectful. You know, overall, it was a very good environment, which is not, you know, necessarily obvious at a football game. And so I really appreciate how the fans spoke out against it from the very beginning. And the reason that the protesters who are outside are my scumbags are because they're not even fans of Aston Villa.
No.
They held this big protest with thousands of anti-Israel protesters chanting about Palestine, waving flags of the Islamic Republic. Almost all of them at some point or another had their faces covered, which of course is against the law in the UK. Police, in the majority of cases that I saw, did absolutely nothing. When there was a counter-protest of pro-Israel voices who were marched through with police escorts on every corner to protect them from these Islamist mobs, they brought them into the basketball court, which was fully caged, yes, caged in, which is why there were people talking about how it was a Jew cage. It was a really, really disgusting thing to see just visually outside of the stadium. However, I myself wasn't involved in that protest because I was going actually to the game. Inside the game is where I, at one point, was actually pulled out of my seat along with the other 3 people that were with me because I had the audacity to wear a shirt that said Zioness on it. And despite the fact that I was wearing a sweater the entire game because it was cold, I took a picture with that shirt during halftime, which prompted someone, I wonder what leanings ideologically they have, reported to the stadium that there was a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. There was a Maccabi Tel Aviv fan. Accused me of wearing a football shirt of Maccabi Tel Aviv, which of course I wasn't. It wasn't even the same colors. Mentioned nothing about that. It was blue and white, not even Maccabi blue, saying Zioness. Yes. So they pulled me out in the presence of dozens, literally dozens of police and stewards from the stadium to interrogate me about what my shirt was and, you know, if it was indeed a Israeli football club, which of course would be the end of the world. It wasn't, and once it was determined what Zioness means, they permitted me to go back to my seats. Now, to their credit, they were very polite, But the fact that you would interrogate someone this way over such a ridiculous complaint is absurd and indicates what the problem is overall in the first place. And this is the reason that Maccabi Tel Aviv said, we don't want the tickets. We don't want our fans to go there because you can't protect us. And one more thing about Birmingham, which is the crazy Islamist hellhole, is that before the game, the Islamist protesters, again, not Aston Villa fans, had put up signs all over the city saying, genocidal baby killers, Maccabi Tel Aviv players, that they've been in Gaza murdering children, which of course there's no evidence of this. And I remind you that Maccabi Tel Aviv is comprised of Israeli Arabs and Jews, both.
Absolutely.
And beyond that, they also had signs that said, if you identify a Zionist, call this hotline. So of course I took a photo with this.
They found you.
They found me. But it was just a really ugly, sad scene. I know a lot of the anti-Israel groups were also conversing during the actual game, saying that they were trying to identify which hotels the players are in, which hotels that fans are in, to try to identify them. So pretty much when the game was over, we got out of Dodge and didn't want to hang out in Birmingham too long. But I think it was important that there were some voices who were pushing back against that, both the counter-protesters and also myself and the others who came with me to attend this game. And it's also important that Aston Villa fans spoke out the way that they did. So I applaud them for that. But my scumbags are these hideous protesters. And I will double down on your scumbag with the police, because the fact that they knew this was going to happen for weeks, and they allowed that protest to take place. And you would have thought that Palestine was playing in a football match, but nope.
The schools
They're politicizing everything about sport. It's outrageous.
They shut some of the schools early.
To come out to protest.
Just because there were things going on in Birmingham.
Oh my God.
Yep.
They're so screwed.
No, it's
really beautiful.
It's really bad, and really, it's an omen, or it's like a window into more things to come. I think, unless there's a drastic change. But well done to you, Emily, for going there,
my life.
for risking your life. You are a true Zioness. And, so kind. And honestly, it's just, I mean, if you're arresting Emily and her friend for wearing a T-shirt, then where have you gotten to? It's really ridiculous.
Yes, we're violent hooligans.
Violent hooligans, yes. At least you're glamorous violent hooligans. All right, well, I'm sticking with the UK. And my scumbags this week, and we've had them on before, but this is very specific, are the BBC, but especially the two people who resigned yesterday. Tim Davie, who is the head of the BBC, and Deborah Turness, who is the head of news for the BBC. And I always love a scumbag with a happy ending, but let's just go. Let's just go through why the BBCs are such scumbags, and why this guy and this woman, the buck stops with them for having 5 years of terribly biased news coverage, especially, of course, the last 2 years during the Gaza war. They essentially became the spokespeople for Hamas, yes, a terrorist organization. First of all, they refused to call them terrorists. They were calling them armed whatever. Let's just go through some of the examples. They got the whole Al-Ai hospital wrong. They claimed that we had bombed and killed hundreds of people. It turned out to be a rocket from Hamas or Islamic Jihad, and only a few people were dead when it was their rocket, of course. Then they told, a BBC presenter said, that Israeli forces were targeting people and medical teams, when in fact the quote was translated wrong. Surprise, surprise. And they said, yes, sorry, we had to retract. There were some medical teams amongst the people, but it wasn't a target. Then they went on to say that we committed, we were doing a forced starvation, famine. They took pictures of kids that was staged and said this is famine. They took pictures of, like the New York Times, of course, of kids who had congenital illnesses and said we were starving them. And of course, they did that very famous BBC documentary where they took a little boy and his terrible life in Gaza, except that he was a son of a Hamas minister, and they didn't bother to check. And even when they found out, they didn't care much. But none of this would have moved this Tim Davie and Deborah Turness to leave But what had to happen for them to actually admit that they are the heads of a rotten Islamist news outlet when they took a tape of Donald Trump and they sliced and diced it to make it sound like he was calling on people to storm the Capitol. Look at this.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Then it turned out that they took a sentence from here and a sentence from there and a sentence from there, and they very dishonestly put it all together.
We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. One of our great achievements will be election security, because nobody until I came along had any idea how corrupt our elections were. I said, something's wrong here, something's really wrong, can't have happened, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And so none of the anti-Jewish hatred or anti-Israel bias, that couldn't move them, because that was really their raison d'etre. What did move them was when the White House said, what is this? And that was real manipulation. But we know that that manipulation that they did with Trump was only the cherry on the cake of the manipulation that they've been doing against Israel and against Jews for the last few years, especially during the war. So like I said at the beginning, I love a scumbag with a happy ending. And the happy ending here is that Tim Davie and Deborah Turner, you're out. And let's hope that the BBC can be redeemed by bringing some serious, unbiased journalists to essentially what is the government's broadcast service, which is paid for by the British taxpayer. And if they don't, I would suggest that the British taxpayer stop paying their license fees, because this is a joke. You're being paid to be indoctrinated by a bunch of haters. So that's my scumbags of the week.
You know, it really just shows you that when they get away with doing this to Jews,
eventually,
when they get away with doing it, and nobody catches them out, and nobody protests it, and they don't get in trouble with their jobs for faulty misinformation journalism, it's like, oh, well, maybe we can keep going. Maybe we can keep. No, you're a liar from the beginning to the end, but you were only caught when you did it with Trump. And I say to everyone at home, like, if you see someone who's being dishonest and manipulative when it comes to Jews, just be aware, pull your lens back a second, because there's a reason they're doing that, and it's not for your benefit.
Well, I think the part that's even more shocking about it is that the part of the reason this all came out now is because there's evidence, so there are internal memos about them knowing that stories they were reporting are false.
And they still ran the story. It fits their narrative. So it wasn't about you telling the news, it was about you fitting the story that you concocted.
I haven't watched the news at home since I got back from Israel after October 7th.
Wow.
Because I turned it on.
GB News are okay.
GB News is about the only one.
Yeah.
It kills me because it looks like it's filmed on a potato and it needs to deal with that. But I came home from Israel where I was watching the news, which was, I could barely understand. It's not good quality.
No,
I could barely understand it, but I could see visually what was going on.
Yeah.
And I came back from Man on a Kibbutz with a camera, bad things, list of names, and I got back home to 4 people in the studio like this saying, well, you know, what we think they're saying may have happened, possibly is, and going on down this rabbit hole of like, sorry, I'm in the Mamad dealing with the rockets coming, and we're not talking about that. So I decided, like, no news for me. Like, GB News I-24 is all I happen to occasionally watch, but it's not worth it. And Janice, obviously.
Of course. No, but really, it's what we've been saying for a long time, that they're not telling the news. They're just not telling the news. They've got a story, they've got an agenda, and everything is just, it's like Al Jazeera. And let's not even talk about BBC Arabia. I mean, they basically take, their commentators are Hamas members. Their journalists are card-carrying Hamas members, and they never disclose the affiliation of their so-called journalists when they're interviewing them. And so this comes out as supposedly decent reporting. It's really... It's just like you say, Jews are always a canary in the mine. When you turn against the Jews, eventually it's coming for you, like that famous poem that we won't go back to. But we need our sanity, and that's why we always find heroes of the week. So, Shoshana, who's your hero this week?
Oh my gosh, I have watched this video so many times.
Yes.
Like, just take it out the trash.
Yes.
Jonathan Carton, you are my hero. Thank you for that visual. And I'm sorry that you had to go through what you went through. He was he is an IDF reservist who was speaking in Toronto. I believe his uncle was unfortunately murdered by a terrorist, and the terrorist was let out in this most recent deal to free the hostages. So he's speaking in Toronto, and what did you call them? Run-of-the-mill pro-Palestinian scumbags came to protest him and were actually increasingly violent, broke through a glass door into, like, really breaking through to the people who were, the Jews who were behind the door. And he was just like, forget this, takes himself out, and one by one takes him out. You've got to watch this video.
Touch them! You're not allowed to touch them! I'm cold!
You're moving.
You're not allowed!
Everyone's moving.
Don't touch me! This is a sign! Don't touch him! No!
And I just feel like every time that happens, like, I know, I'm not into football / soccer, I'm American, like, whatever. Football. But this is the kind of thing I get behind. I will watch this over and over again and cheer for my team, because this is the kind of stuff that makes me so happy to see, like, good people, or at least people who stand for their convictions.
Just had
and they're just standing there like, don't stop, oh no. Like, what? Who are you? You've no backbone. You have no nothing. You just stand there with your mask and you come and you scream, and then someone actually takes himself seriously and says, I'm not going to stand up, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to take you out. And you just get trashed out there, my friends, trashed out. And if you guys at home are like cheering for that guy, for those guys who like just stand there with their phones and their keffiyehs wrapped around them, you're on the wrong team.
Absolutely. But also, don't they sound like screaming zombies?
Oh, they're not.
Every single protest I see, it's like they're like hysterical. Zombies. That's what it seems to me. All
Can't torture them. Even if you wanted to.
They're no brains. They're vapid. They don't.
It's crazy.
I mean, Jonathan is a friend of mine, and I loved the way he just like.
Love that video. You know, it's like bookmarked.
I texted him, and he's like, they just didn't know.
But he was hurt. Like, you know, we're laughing, but he had lacerations.
Of course, we had lacerations.
It needs to be in a gift, so we can just send it around.
Please don't be that.
Okay, I do.
Kol hakavod, Jonathan. That's a great hero. Emily, who's your hero?
So my hero this week is Noga Erez, the Israeli artist, who has been targeted a lot over the past 2 years. She's spoken about how a lot of her gigs were canceled. We have a clip of her speaking.
Today, I got a call from my management saying that many of the festivals and media appearances that booked me have canceled my participation. Because I'm an Israeli. I really wish it was just one case, but the list kind of keeps growing. It's not for anything that I said. It's simply because I was born where I was born. I believe that boycotting artists will not bring any solution. I believe that banning songs and movies and plays and books, etc., is not gonna fix the world's problems. The world is full of so much suffering. The amount of pain happening right now is devastating. I've seen some of it with my own eyes. Maybe right now would be the best time for us to try and find common ground and not add to how shitty it already is.
So as you can see, unfortunately, one of the byproducts of this conflict and the politicization of everything arts and culture is that a lot of Israeli artists and athletes have been targeted in different circumstances. And despite the fact that they have nothing to do with the politics and in fact often are very critical of the Israeli government, it's never enough for the Jew haters. Now, Noga is very successful internationally. She has had a sold-out tour all over the world despite the war situation. But her closing show in Mexico City, she received dozens of death threats, of violence. They tried to get her to cancel the show. They warned her that she would be assaulted along with her team and the fans if she went forward with the show. She went forward with the show anyway, as she should, so kol hakavod to her for that. And they did try to, there was a lot of security, they did try to attack some of the fans and the team, and I think this is disgusting. But I have to say to her, in response to all of this hatred, I'm just kol hakavod. I mean, standing up to that is not, it's not obvious, it's not an easy thing, and you shouldn't have to do it. You shouldn't have to do it. And the fact that you are just because of where you were born and your nationality is ridiculous. And I just want to play one more clip of Noga responding to the BDS haters and some of the comments. Take a look. So Noga Erez, you're my hero of the week.
Nice. Exactly. These artists don't want to be dealing with this. They just want to sing.
Yeah.
They just want to be who they are. Absolutely. All these artists who've shown such mettle in the last few years. Good for them. Stephen.
Wow, so many options for heroes as much as there are options for scumbags,
Yes.
which is really, really cool. Yes. So I'm going a very different direction, but the work that I've been doing recently is supporting Jews in their workplace Jewish groups. So a lot of the big companies have started. I started the one at Amazon. It was a nightmare.
Explain to us what this is.
So it's kind of like a JSTOC or a Hillel, but at work.
At work.
So
Very
there's a lot of like these diversity, equity, inclusion groups where we have the Black Employee Network, the Asian Employee Network, whoever. And my thing at Amazon was, I did a long training, didn't see any mention of Jews. I said, where are the Jews? And someone said to me, start a group.
Right.
It was a endless paperwork and nightmares, and you're just a religion. We don't do religions. And we could do a whole 3-hour episode on the things that I see. But as much as it's tough work, it's really important work, and it's really kind of changing the space a little bit for Jews in the workplace, especially since the war, who came back to work on October the 9th, the people writing Free Palestine on their workplace Slack channel. Like many companies saw that sort of thing, and Al Jazeera being shared on the company resources. And then you see Microsoft a few weeks ago who had encampments on their actual campus. They broke into the president's office and they're demanding all these things. So it's a little bit crazy, but also people just want to be in their little Jewish community at work because they don't know how to talk about what's going on. It doesn't have to be physical. They just want a little channel. So my heroes are all of these people that are doing their full-time job and then deciding to, on the side, be the Jewish leader in that space. It's really tough. They're countering anti-Semitism, hate, and doing positive things. There's like 100 Hanukkah parties about to go on in big companies that you'd never think would do a Hanukkah party or do a Purim party or throw out apple and honey at Rosh Hashanah and honey cake. It was a honey cake tasting competition where people, so amazing, amazing things. So my heroes are all of those people that decided to stand up and lead. They've had their Hineni moment. They've said, here I am, I'm going to lead.
Very nice. Oh, well done. And well done to you for leading the charge and starting the whole thing.
It's sad I have to do it. I feel like there's no organization doing it. So my thing is I quit my job in tech. I had an amazing job in tech and I turned my back on it because it's really important that we support each other as Jews. So hopefully we're going to start moving. We're a non-profit now. We're doing all the fun things. The fundraising begins, which is just the best.
Oh, yeah. So best part of it. Well done. It's really important work. I know what you've done. And it's taking off. And I think that's what people don't realize about anti-Semitism. The more you hate us, the more we're like, okay, we're going to be a little bit more Jewish now. The Jewier we get. The Jewier we get. Okay, my hero this week is Ben Shapiro, because in a viper's den that has become the woke right in the Republican Party, in the MAGA movement, whatever you want to see it, with scumbags that we've had in before, like Tucker Carlson, who is really determined to bring back old school medieval Christian anti-Semitism, and platforms, famous haters like Nick Fuentes, who is a racist, a homophobe, a misogynist, says women want to get raped. This is the guy saying black people should have, basically chanting for apartheid, the real one, not the one they invent, that doesn't exist over here. The scum of the earth, and the Tucker Carlson platforms this guy. People are beginning to normalize this guy and his terrible, terrible bigoted beliefs. And nobody's saying anything. and the head of the Heritage Foundation, which is one of the most important, if not the most important, right-wing conservative think tank in America, is saying, oh, why are you picking on Tucker? We don't believe in cancel culture. No, you had a responsibility. Your own people are doing a mutiny against you. But I'm not here to talk about scumbags. I'm here to talk about the one hero that has actually come out in the only, what's that expression in Hebrew that ends dom, where is the, where is the tzaddik? Exactly. So that's Ben Shapiro, who is unapologetically, even if he's lost followers, he doesn't care and he's not losing any sleep. But he went on the Megyn Kelly live shows that she did. He went on his own channel and basically took all of the most hideous opinions of Nick Fuentes and put them out on display for people to see who this little worm is and how the platforming is basically normalizing not just hatred towards the Jews, hatred towards everyone, and how everybody seems to be going along. Even the New York Times did an almost flattering piece on Nick Fuentes where they actually put, look at this, a picture where the little worm looks semi-attractive, which he isn't. That's the New York Times platforming racist. As long as they hate Jews, that's okay by them.
Not deserving.
He's Nazi, a Hitler fan, a Stalin fan. And Ben Shapiro did this extremely viral clip. I think it's gone more viral than the Nick Fuentes interview with Tucker Carlson, saying this is who this is. And anybody who's normalizing him or whitewashing him or softballing questions to him is complicit to this hatred. And it's, again, like you said, Shoshana, it's not just about the Jews. It only starts with the Jews. These people are bad news. And the fact that Ben Shapiro has to be the only guy who calls it out, I think is shameful that he's the only guy, but I want to give him the zchut and the credit for being the hero who's calling it out, because every generation needs one. And Ben Shapiro, that's you right now. So Ben Shapiro is my hero of the week.
So I actually have taken issue with Ben on various things, whether it's abortion, whether it's whatever.
On everything.
So, but what I want to say is this: as you're speaking, I'm thinking like, what if Ben wasn't in that position? Like, what if Ben had not been who he is with the positions and opinions that he has, and what if he had not gotten himself that type of platform and he wasn't there to do that work of saying, you're cheering a Nazi?
Yeah.
Because if someone from the Democratic Party or someone who is left-leaning or whatever, even centrist, who were to do that, they wouldn't go viral like that. And so I feel like, they talk about Queen Esther, like who knows if this is the reason you got to the throne, you became the queen. And I do wonder if this is maybe Ben Shapiro's Queen Esther moment. Like maybe this, to fight this insanity in his own party, is why he built the platform that he has built over the years and gotten the respect that he's gotten and built up the following that he has. And I do wonder, this is what Jews believe in, right? Like, this is my job. Like you said, I had a great job in tech, but my people need me. And so.
But Ben Shapiro, it's not just that he's an Orthodox Jew, he's a big American patriot.
Absolutely.
Yes. So when he does this because he knows this is bad for America.
For sure.
And I really admire him. Again, like you, I don't agree with everything he says. Yeah. But he's the only guy coming out and talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few others. I know Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, Dinesh, and also the Officer Tatum has come out.
Yeah.
There are the conservative, but in terms of like going all out there to dissect who this worm is, Nick Fuentes?
Because Ben he's intellectually, he has intellectual integrity, which is something that we're seeing be compromised, of course, on the left in the past few years.
Oh,
with
they're gone.
Democratic Socialists of America and how they've sort of subverted that movement, and now they're doing it on the right, and a lot of it is Qatar. And other nefarious actors within the right. But instead of actually sticking to their own conservative principles, they are excusing people because they're friends with them. And by the way, also Megyn Kelly. Wow, the way that Ben destroyed her in that interview, unbelievable. And he's ripping her arguments apart, and she's saying, "Oh, well, I didn't watch." Really? But your job is literally to have an opinion. You're a pundit. You should have an opinion. What is this? Oh, well, I'm not going to have opinions about people who say things on the right.
I know, and she's not my friend. But when he talks about Candace Owens, but when she interviewed Tucker Carlson, and she was asking him only a few difficult questions, he was so rude to her.
Yeah, he was.
He was so rude. He's actually, as we say in Spanish, an antipático. Antipati, you know what I mean? It's like, he's just not nice.
Yeah.
The turning point had him to doing one of these events, and somebody asked him a question, and he was still not nice to them. He doesn't have the charm and the kindness of Charlie Kirk. Like, why? I hope that his star is going to start to fall, because it has to.
Yeah.
I mean, and however much Qatar props him up,
propped up. Yeah.
for sure, he's been propped up by Qatar. And really, that's another. We talked about Iran a lot, but Qatar is also the one to 100% try and bring down.
Yep.
So with that happy note, and with our heroes, we brace ourselves for what the next week will bring. Hopefully good news, and hopefully the rest of our fallen heroes coming home for a dignified burial. And with that, we also pray for peace and quiet. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments coming out of Israel. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman says Riyadh wants to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel, but only if that process includes a clear path towards a Palestinian state. Speaking alongside U.S. President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, bin Salman says the two leaders had a healthy discussion and are working to create the right situation for a pathway to a two-state solution. Trump says they discussed one-state and two-state options, adding that bin Salman has a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords. Bin Salman emphasized that Saudi Arabia wants peace for Israelis and Palestinians in a future where both coexist peacefully. Let's take a listen.
So definitely we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing, and we want to be part of the Abraham Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. We talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region, and we will do our best to reach that day.
President Trump also announced a new defense pact with Saudi Arabia and confirmed plans to sell it F-35 fighter jets, as well as a program to help it develop a civil nuclear program for the kingdom. Ynet reported that the IDF has issued a warning to Israeli officials that the F-35 sale could threaten Israel's qualitative military edge. A position paper from the Israeli Air Force says its long-range operations depend on exclusive access to the jet, and Saudi deployment of identical aircraft could undercut that advantage. When asked about Israel's concerns over the arms deal with Saudi Arabia, Trump said both countries are great allies and deserve top-of-the-line equipment. On reports that Israel conditioned the sale on Saudi normalization, Trump said Israel is aware and they're going to be very happy. A deadly terror attack in Judea yesterday, a combined ramming and stabbing at the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem, has left one man dead and 3 others wounded. 71-year-old Kiryat Arba resident Aaron Cohen was killed, and 3 others, a woman in her 40s, a 30-year-old man, and a 15-year-old boy suffered light to moderate injuries when 2 Palestinian terrorists rammed their vehicle into a crowd of civilians and then attempted to stab them before they were neutralized by security forces on scene. Cohen was laid to rest last night in Kiryat Arba. A widower, he leaves behind 6 children and many grandchildren. According to the IDF and witnesses, the terrorists arrived by car, accelerated into pedestrians standing near the junction, and then exited the vehicle with knives. Nearby IDF reservists reacted instantly, shooting and killing both attackers. Inside the terrorists' car, security forces later discovered explosive materials, which were neutralized by border police bomb disposal units. Palestinian Islamic Jihad praised the attack, calling on Palestinians to escalate violence. Hamas called it a natural response, though neither group formally claimed responsibility. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the terror attack. He said in a statement that today we experienced another Palestinian terrorist attack and we are determined to complete the war on all fronts, including disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a greater danger. The IDF announced that terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon were attacked a short time ago. Yesterday, Lebanese officials say 13 people were killed and 4 injured after an Israeli drone strike hit a Hamas training compound inside the Ain al-Hilwe refugee camp near Sidon. The deadliest IAF strikes in Lebanon since ceasefire nearly a year ago. Lebanese media report a vehicle at the entrance to the camp was hit by 3 missiles with damage both inside and outside the vehicle. The IDF says it used precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and real-time intelligence to minimize civilian harm. That's all for this newscast, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. I'm Sivan Raviv.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader here back in Jerusalem, and this week we're discussing the Jew ban in Birmingham at the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football match, which I had the pleasure or displeasure, depending on how you look at it, of attending myself. We'll also discuss the fracture on the American right, where neo-Nazis seem to have gained a foothold within the GOP. Can the party leader stamp out this extremism? We'll speak about this with conservative commentator and author Dinesh D'Souza about the challenges within the GOP. All this now on Axis of Truth. Well, this past week, I went to the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football match in Birmingham, UK. Not as a journalist, not as a political commentator, but simply as a football fan. Now, mind you, Israeli fans were explicitly banned from this match for absurd reasons, which I'll detail shortly, but I bought my ticket fairly like anyone else in the Aston Villa section, and I cheered for them because their fans support Maccabi Tel Aviv and opposed the ban from day one. And yet, because I took a photo wearing a shirt that said Zioness, the horror, I was reported by someone. Someone decided that a word declaring pride in being a Jewish woman was apparently a threat or some kind of violation. Dozens of police officers and security staff from the stadium descended on me to interrogate me about what Zioness meant. They accused me, falsely, of wearing Israeli football gear in the home section at a football game. The horror. It was absurd. Even Aston Villa fans around me defended me and said that she's done nothing wrong. But the stewards from the stadium refused to listen, dragged me out of my seat anyway. Take a look.
Okay, ladies, who's got the actual Israeli football t-shirt on?
Not Israeli football t-shirt. She got a Zionist. I don't have Israeli football t-shirt. None of us. Look. This has nothing to do with Maccabi.
But yeah, but it's Zionist.
Yeah, but
what is Zionist?
Wait. But it's an organization and it's him. We're not doing Maccabi.
Just bear with me a minute. The report I had was that you had a football top on.
Nope, absolutely not.
Let me check with our controls,
Yeah.
and then we'll find out if you can stay or you can go. It's for your safety as much as anything else.
So this was pure discrimination, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. All of this occurred after the West Midlands police banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending altogether under the ridiculous claim that they were hooligans after the pogrom that took place against Jews who attended a similar match in Amsterdam. But what they really meant is that they couldn't guarantee Jewish safety in a city where pro-Hamas thugs roam freely. And that is indeed what we saw. Outside the stadium, the real hooligans were easy to find. Hundreds of protesters, many wearing masks in violation of UK law, waved flags of Palestine, even of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and chanted for genocide against Jews and Israel. Some of them held signs that said, "Call the anti-terror hotline if you see a Zionist." These signs were posted all over the city as well, along with others that called Israeli football players baby killers. From the streets, you would have thought that it was Palestine playing a football match that night, but it wasn't. It was just the Jew haters who can't stand the idea, apparently, of Jewish people playing sports. In the end, after I explained that my shirt had nothing to do with football and simply meant a female Zionist, I was allowed back in. But the truth is that the damage was done because this is blatant discrimination. This disgraceful episode shows just how far Britain has fallen. When the West Midlands police literally fabricated excuses and openly discriminate against Jewish or Israeli football fans while ignoring actual extremists on their streets, it's clear that the country has lost its moral compass. This was never about security. It was never about hooligan football fans or racism. It was about hatred of Israel. It was about hatred about a society so cowed by terrorists and mob rule that it punishes Jews for simply existing and wanting to attend a football match. And today I can tell you that I had the displeasure of seeing that hatred up close and personal. Well, our next story this week is also in the United Kingdom and is an example of just how egregious the money laundering has become when it comes to the Islamic Republic. A shocking investigation by the Sunday Times exposed that this week that Ali Ansari, a 56-year-old Iranian banker now sanctioned by the UK for funding the IRGC, quietly built a £142 million property empire across London's most exclusive neighborhoods. And he's far from the only one. Ansari bought more than a dozen mansions on the Bishop's Avenue in Hampstead. It's a street that's known as Billionaires Row, and he did this using a shell company registered in the Isle of Man. He disguised his Iranian identity in doing so, listing himself instead as a resident of Cyprus. But this is not a story about a single mansion or one greedy banker. Ansari went on to purchase an additional £33.7 million mansion for his family, along with 2 luxury flats near Kensington Palace, worth another £36 million. He even had staff quarters attached to each one. All the while, he was allegedly financing the IRGC, the same terror arm of the Islamic Republic behind global assassinations, cyber attacks, the targeting of journalists and dissidents worldwide. Kind of makes you wonder where all that money came from, Well, the UK government finally sanctioned Ansari after his family's private bank collapsed in Tehran under billions of pounds in debt. Officials in London have described him as a corrupt businessman who provided economic resources to the IRGC and to individuals who are working to destabilize other countries, including the United Kingdom itself. And what's truly disturbing is how openly all of this took place. Ansari wasn't even hiding. I mean, he traveled frequently to Britain. He held multiple passports from Iran, Cyprus, and St. Kitts and Nevis, and continued to oversee his sprawling London estates, while ordinary Iranians back home are facing poverty, hunger, and of course, state violence. British intelligence has already confirmed more than 20 Iran-backed plots on UK soil just in the past year. And these operations target journalists, activists, and dissidents who fled the regime's brutality. Yet even as the regime's agents are being exposed, one of its top financiers was quietly living in luxury in London's safest and wealthiest neighborhoods, and many of them still are. This story should really be a wake-up call because it proves that the regime's corruption isn't confined to Tehran. In fact, the regime actually has more influence in London than it does over the Iranian people inside of Iran. It's penetrated deep into these Western capitals, specifically London, aided by financial secrecy, shell companies, and really a lack of enforcement. And sadly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Billions of dollars stolen from the Iranian people have been funneled through the UK and across Europe under the guise of business and investment. The same regime that jails women, that tortures women for showing their hair, that murders protesters for demanding freedom, is laundering its money through Europe, and in particular, London real estate. While the Iranian people fight for dignity and justice, their nation's wealth is being siphoned off by the cronies who live in mansions, drive luxury cars, and enjoy the freedoms denied to all those back home. Even their children attend expensive private schools in the West, while the regime itself rails against the West. Iran's dictatorship is not only exporting terror, they're exporting this corruption. And until the West shuts down these networks, every unchallenged transaction and every empty mansion will stand as a monument to our own blindness. Now, next up, we have to discuss the now viral video of Kevin Roberts, president of one of the leading conservative think tanks in Washington, the Heritage Foundation, in which he defended Tucker Carlson's decision to host neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes, a video that was nothing short of humiliating and a perfect example of the moral decay within parts of the conservative movement. Now, in this clip, which has garnered now over 25 million views, Roberts called critics of Tucker Carlson a venomous coalition, which apparently I'm now a part of. This video he halfways backtracked on only a few days later, but first he doubled down. All this, mind you, while he was pretending that his argument was that we shouldn't attack those who are also on the right. Now, this is despite the fact that Tucker Carlson has spent the past 2 years viciously attacking other conservatives. And don't even get me started on the vile scum that is Nick Fuentes that he platformed. These actions by Kevin were not courage, they were cowardice, intellectual and moral bankruptcy dressed up as some kind of principle. Now, fortunately, the backlash that we saw from some of the true conservatives was immediate. There was a lot of controversy. We saw figures like Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell, and Ben Shapiro publicly condemning Carlson for platforming this open anti-Semite, Nick Fuentes, warning that giving him airtime wasn't really about free speech. It was about spreading the cancer of hate and racism. Even longtime GOP allies called the episode a grotesque moral failure. But tragically, we also saw that others in right-wing media who chose silence or, even worse, deflection. Megyn Kelly's continued refusal to condemn Tucker Carlson, or even the blatant Jew hatred of Candace Owens, was another display of illogical moral weakness. Now, Owens has repeatedly trafficked in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, blaming Jews for their own persecution. She's parroted extremist propaganda that honestly is completely indistinguishable from that of both the far left and the far right. And she's been spreading unbelievably inappropriate conspiracy theories about the murder of Charlie Kirk. First, she accused Israel. Now she's alluding that Erica Kirk was somehow involved. Yet instead of strong condemnation, Kelly shrugged it off and said she didn't want to attack Candace because she's a young mother. What? You're supposed to be a journalist. That is not journalism. That is enabling hate for ratings and for relevance. This really isn't a hard thing for people to do, to condemn racism. And then, of course, there's Tucker Carlson himself, whose recent embrace of anti-Semitic and authoritarian narratives isn't anything but accidental. Now, his media company was initially funded by Pakistani-Iranian businessman Omid Malik. Carlson claims that he and Neil Patel bought out Malik's stake, but the financial records do raise a lot of questions. Now, according to the available records, what Carlson would have had to pay is in the tens of millions of dollars just in difference from the initial investment, and there doesn't seem to be a conceivable way that Carlson could have afforded that, which of course prompts the question, who made up or what made up that difference in funding? Now, perhaps coincidentally, around that same time, Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr., who was also involved in the establishment of this network, Tucker Carlson's network, began appearing with Qatari officials and even attended the Qatar Economic Forum. Now, Carlson's transformation from American conservative to a populist propagandist for the Islamic Republic, for Russia, for Venezuela even, reveals something possibly far darker than political naivete. It's ideological corruption, and the Heritage Foundation's defense of him shows that the right is being hijacked and subverted from within. If the conservatives in the United States cannot find the moral courage to draw the line at anti-Semitism, then they've really already lost the battle for their own soul. Well, following that story and the crazy developments on the right in America, joining us now to discuss the issue is Dinesh D'Souza. Now, Dinesh is one of the most popular conservative intellectuals in the U.S., as well as a filmmaker and an author himself. Previously, he worked in the Reagan White House, and he's the author of the best-selling book, United States of Socialism, America, and the Big Lie. Today, his new film, The Dragon's Prophecy, explores the biblical dimensions of the October 7th massacre and the struggle we see between good and evil. So as you can imagine, this conversation is extremely timely. Dinesh, thank you so much for joining us today on Axis of Truth. Now, you've been one of the most prominent conservative thinkers, I would say, in the last few decades. I want to get your take on how you interpret what's happening right now in the GOP. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of anti-Semites and fringe, isolationists kind of attempting to take over the conservative movement from within. Do you think that this is the greatest internal threat that conservatives or conservatism has faced, at least since the Reagan era?
Yeah, I do think it is. In the Reagan era, there were safeguards and limits to all this, in the sense that you had, I would say, kind of a group of responsible guardians who, again, didn't try to suppress anybody, but made a distinction between free speech on the one hand and either endorsing points of view on the other, or allowing them respectability in the Republican Party or on the right. So these guardians were people like Bill Buckley, Irving Kristol, and there were many others. Reagan himself was also part of this. He would have no truck with any kind of naked bigotry of the kind that we're seeing today. And it's not just about the Jews. It's racial bigotry. Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, just posted a Halloween photo of his two kids, dressed up, all, looking very all-American and excited to go out and collect candy. And all you have to do is just go down his feed and you see all this abuse, about him being brown and his kids not belonging in America. And so the anti-Semitism is allied with other types of bigotry that are also resurfacing in very ugly ways. And so I think not only is there the risk of chasing away conservative Jews, but also conservative Indians, conservative Blacks, conservative Latinos. I mean, there is no Trump coalition without these conservative minorities that have been moving in the direction of the GOP. So nothing could be more destructive and suicidal, just from a political point of view, to allow this to continue.
Well, the Heritage Foundation, one of the leading moral and intellectual pillars of the conservative movement, they helped shape the agenda of the Reagan and actually also the Trump administration. How did it get to this point with what we saw just in the past few weeks? The defense of figures like Tucker Carlson by Kevin Roberts, who even in that video he released kind of echoed some of these anti-Semitic talking points himself. They've also aligned themselves in some cases with Islamist-backed propaganda networks in some cases. And is this just ideological drift, or is it a deliberate subversion of the right that we're seeing?
This is a hard question to answer because I have known a lot of these parties: Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Bannon, Gates. My first job when I came to Washington, D.C. in 1985 was at the Heritage Foundation. I was the managing editor of their magazine, then called Policy Review. So I'm a Heritage alumnus, you could say. And I think all of this is so difficult to analyze on the basis of motive. It's very easy to analyze on the basis of its effects, which are manifestly destructive. And the motives, I think, vary between these different people and institutions. Uh, so, for example, Candace, I think, has always wanted to be a kind of Hollywood figure. And I don't know if she became enamored with Kanye West, and that was her entree to that cultural sphere, which is actually more important to her than the political sphere. I don't know if that's where she got the virus, I think is what I'm saying. Um, Tucker is a whole different matter. There's been the idea that he's being paid by Qatar, but he's from a wealthy family. He has a large following. He doesn't really need Qatar to pay his electric bill. So it has never seemed to me to be at least an adequate explanation. And yet, Tucker does act like an agent of Qatar, right? In other words, he defends Qatar in his newsletter all the time. Not only that, he's defended Sharia law, which is a very odd thing for him to defend. Societies with Sharia law are a lot more orderly. Um, and so, and he has said that Netanyahu is the main villain of the war with Hamas. So not Hamas. And again, goes beyond disagreements with Israel or beliefs that Israel didn't have had the wrong strategy. Now, Heritage is in a different position. I think what's happened with Heritage, to some degree also with TPUSA, Turning Point, they have gone rather deep into the water with Tucker. And disassociating with him is very difficult. I mean, Heritage has been funneling a lot of money to be a sponsor of Tucker's show, and they have sort of a alliance with the Tucker Carlson network. In their defense, or to say a word on their behalf, this Tucker turn is all fairly recent. I mean, I myself toured with Tucker a year ago in Australia. We spoke in a number of Australian cities. Not a word of any of this came up. And so this is all a new Tucker, if I can put it that way, that we're seeing over the last 6 to 9 months. And maybe Heritage is in a difficult position of not quite knowing what to do now that it's kind of like entering to a legal partnership with somebody you discover that they're a fraudster. And now you're like, what do I do now? So I'm hoping that Heritage is actually looking for a way to disassociate from Tucker. But I think they are very reluctant to do that in a public manner.
Now, one of the things that I found particularly disturbing is this idea that you can't criticize someone because they're on the right. And I know you spoke a little bit about Tucker Carlson already. I personally wouldn't even consider him to be on the right anymore. I mean, he was defending Venezuelan socialism under Maduro just a few days ago. He interviewed Pezeshkian, the president of the Islamic Republic, with really a softball interview. And he says that he hates Christian Zionists when his own father was a Christian Zionist. I mean, I'm not really sure how people are still justifying this as some sort of movement on the right. This isn't anything I certainly ever grew up with in any of the organizations I was involved with. So I guess I'm just confused as to why it would even be difficult to condemn for Turning Point USA, for Heritage Foundation, for Megyn Kelly, for many of the people whom I've long admired, in some cases worked with. Why is it so hard for them to say we disagree with this and these are problematic statements? Because that's not cancellation, it's condemnation. How did this happen? I mean, we're seeing people on the right suddenly behaving like the left.
Yeah, and look, I think the roots of it go back to the fact that there has been so much political repression, deplatforming, censorship. You can't say this, you can't say that. A lot of young people have been sort of villainized for being young and white and male. And let's just say that propaganda campaign, heavy-handed as it was, has not worked, because a lot of young people went in the exact opposite direction and now began to interpret the more outrageous the thing you say, the more you are giving the middle finger to these elites who are trying to keep you down. This is really the key to understanding the popularity of Nick Fuentes, for example. It's not that people think that Nick Fuentes is, Nick Fuentes purports to be an alpha male. I mean, he's unbelievably beta male, right? He's got this high-pitched nasal voice. He looks like any mid-sized woman could like crush him, to the ground. So he's not exactly an embodiment of like Conan the Barbarian, but he is the ultimate kind of middle finger guy, right? And so if you say something is a taboo, he will say it. And I think a lot of young people are like, yeah. So this is the sort of cultural phenomenon you're dealing with now. The idea that all these young people are sort of they have a coherent ideology, they don't. So I blame the Pied Pipers like Tucker who are feeding them that ideology. The ideology is not coming from the bottom up. It's actually being provided from the top down. And that is why the responsibility falls squarely on guys like Tucker who are in a very sort of sly way, advancing ideas without taking the responsibility of defending those ideas. Like, I've never seen Tucker say, all right, let me give you 3 reasons why it would have been really good for us to ally with Hitler against Stalin in World War II. It's because, let's just say, Hitler was not a threat to Europe, Stalin was. Hitler wasn't going around invading other countries, Stalin was. Now, all of this is the opposite of the truth. So you can't make that case. So he doesn't bother to make it. He simply brings it out of a guest. He agrees wholeheartedly. He acts like it's a very profound insight that has been suppressed for decades. This is the modus operandi that we're dealing with. And I think what is heartening, I think, Emily, is that when I first went out against Tucker, no one was condemning him by name. People were disgruntled, but they were afraid to like take him on, partly because they saw him as too deeply embedded. He's got Trump's cell phone, and he's close to JD, and he's got a massive following. But I'm happy to say that now pretty much the entire mainstream of the conservative movement is up in arms about all this. I think even Heritage is in full-scale retreat, although they're treating it, I think, regrettably, not as a moral problem, but as a crisis management problem, which reflects a real weakness at that institution.
I want to ask you a little bit about the Dragon's Prophecy, your new film. It makes the moral and biblical case for Israel. And unfortunately, today, I think we see Christianity sort of being twisted, mostly by political actors, to justify hatred of Jews or even other forms of anti Semitism, in some cases, even sympathy for terrorists. How did this inversion happen? And what do you say to Christians who are being misled into thinking that this hostility to the state of Israel is somehow an expression of faith?
There's a scene in that film, this is toward the end, where my wife Debbie and I are baptized in the Jordan River. Now, this is a very innocuous thing that we did before there was any of this controversy. And yet, symbolically, look at what it shows. It shows, first of all, our connection as Christians to the land of Israel. I mean, that Jordan River has been flowing since ancient times. It's the same water. It also happens to be the same water in which Jesus was baptized. And so this emphasizes that it emphasizes the Jewishness of Jesus, someone who's raised in a Jewish household, taught in synagogues, bathed in the pool of Siloam along with the countless other Jews, walked the pilgrimage road to the temple. So, despite the universality of God, and of course Christians believe in the universality of the message of Jesus, nevertheless, you can't deny the particularity of that same God. He chose a particular people at a particular time in history. So, in that sense, God's presence in the world, we understand as Christians, was manifested in a very particular way. I think it was one of the popes, it might have been Benedict or John Paul, I don't remember, who said it is the Holy Land for everyone, but it is the promised land only to the Jews. That's the mainstream Christian position. Now, admittedly, over centuries, there have been renegade groups that have tried to separate the Jews from the Christians, the Old Testament from the New. By the way, the latest practitioner of this dark art was the Nazis themselves, who needed Christian support, particularly in Munich and those parts of Germany, and so they needed a Christianity, and so they sort of adopted what they called positive Christianity, which was an attempt to kick out the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures out of the Bible. and claim, in a sense, an earlier version of replacement theology. So isn't it amazing that this exact same sort of doctrine and heresy is back and is being pursued by people who have, well, something of a similar agenda?
Yeah, disappointing, I would say, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. I know your film also draws a parallel between what happened on October 7th and also the ancient biblical wars that we read about between Israel, or I should say the Israelites, and the Philistines. Do you see today's ideological and spiritual battles, even inside the West, not just in the Middle East, as a continuation of that same moral struggle between good and evil?
Yes, I think that in ancient times the battle was fought mainly on the battlefield, and so the Israelites had to put on the armor and face the Philistines, either individually, as David did with Goliath, or collectively on the battlefield. Today, it's a more complex battlefield because the battlefield is partly military, as we see in the war between Israel and Hamas, but it's also cultural, it's moral, there's a propaganda war going on, and also the enemies are more complicated. Even though there is a, even though the Palestinians and the Philistines, that's kind of the same name, they're not actually the same people. They're motivated differently, right? The Palestinians do it in the name of Allah. They are Muslims. They claim themselves the mantle of God. The Philistines, of course, were pagans and worship multiple gods. You also have inside the West this phenomenon of a cultural left that is politically allied with these radical jihadis, a very odd alliance. Some people have called it the Red-Green Alliance. It's particularly odd because those two groups cannot inhabit each other's worlds. And and God forbid, if you and I were defeated and we were out of the picture and they control the world, I think they would start chopping each other's heads off. Only one side would be left standing. So that macabre, that is exactly what happened in Iran, and the jihadis won. So that's an excellent point. So yes, I do think that it's a spiritual war, no less now than then. Although I think that the weapons and the landscape of the battlefield is broader and somewhat different.
Well, exactly, and that's what happened in Iran. The last question I want to ask you for today, in the dragon's prophecy, you call for Christians and Jews to return to their roots and to stand united. I think it's more important, perhaps now than ever, in particular this week, at least than it has been in a long time. But what does that actually look like in practice? And can the moral alliance between Christians and Jews survive this wave of anti-Semitic, I guess, infiltration and more importantly, political manipulation that we're witnessing right now?
The need for it is very obvious, both on the political and on the spiritual level. So, in other words, if the devil, which is the dragon, is resurrecting the ancient enemies of Israel, in an effort to attack not only, by the way, the Jews, God's chosen people, but also what the film calls the spiritual Israelites, which is to say the Christians who are, in the words of the Bible, engrafted onto the tree. So, in other words, this is the spiritual case for Jews and Christians to come together. But look, even if you were to set aside the Bible and the spiritual argument, if there's a red-green alliance, it's united by one thing: hatred of Jews and Israel on the one hand, and hatred of Christians and the principles of America and the West on the other. So it's not very hard to see why the hated groups need to come together against the bad guys, right? Against the devil's platoons, if I can put it that way. This is what makes the right-wing effort, the perverse effort on the MAGA right to drive a wedge between Jews and Christians, a wedge between America and Israel, all the more baffling. And I think that even though we could give rational and even secular arguments for why that's come about, in the end, I think that there is a sort of diabolical or spiritual root even to that. In other words, the dragon is operating not only with the jihadis, not only with the cultural left, but I'm sorry to say, also right of center on our own side, sowing the seeds of division and hatred.
And just for our viewers, how can people watch this when it's available?
The website for the film is thedragonsprophecyfilm.com. You can stream it on a number of platforms. And it's also available in DVDs on Amazon and also from that same website. So it's The Dragons, plural, a prophecyfilm.com.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Dinesh D'Souza. Absolute pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure.
And now for our good story of the week. For the good, the bad, and the ugly, IDF soldier Jonathan Carton was speaking at a student supporting Israel event in Toronto at TMU, only to have an anti-Semitic mob raid literally the event and assault him. Now, while security was unable to control these violent thugs, Jonathan took action and expelled physically many of the rioters himself. Take a look at this hero.
On the damage of